Good evening, everyone. So welcome to this full council meeting. It's a very busy one, as you all know, and I'd just like to acknowledge the amount of citizens we have here today, in fact, overflowing into the conference hall, so thank you for your engagement. I need to firstly draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure, which hopefully you can see displayed on the screen. Do signal if you need more advice on this. As Lord Mayor, I'm given the responsibility to run this meeting in an orderly and respectful manner on behalf of full council and to the best of my ability. So I hope you will all pay due respect to each other. We will have a variety of opinions and views about the issues being debated, and rightly so. So I have decided that item 12, Senior Executive Remuneration Review, is moved up the agenda to be heard after item 7. Members are reminded that they may have been privy to some exempt information in the past relating to senior officers' pay that cannot be discussed in this public meeting. So we go into agenda item 2, apologies for absence, which we just covered a moment ago as well. We have Councillor Davies, Windows, and did we have confirmation of, is there any other apologies for absence?
Yeah, the ones I gave earlier, plus Councillor Khan. Councillor
Khan, thank you. Is there any councillors who've notified that they will be significantly late tonight? No one? Thank you.
And Councillor Wright might be 15 minutes late.
Thank you very much. That's been noted. So we move on to agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. So firstly, I move the minutes of the meeting of council held on the 26th of February as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Hants. So can I take it that the minutes are agreed? Thank you very much. Can I ask, please, whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding any of the items on today's agenda? Yes, Councillor Sargent.
Just with regard to the silver motion, my husband is an employee of the Brunel Pension Partnership.
Thank you. That's been noted. Oh, sorry.
On the plus one, ex-employee, ex-retired employee of First Plus.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes.
Very briefly, and perhaps on behalf of a lot of the Chamber, can I point out quite a few of members of the AVON pension fund scheme, either as former officers or councillors in receipt of a pension.
Thank you. Any others? No. Okay, so on to agenda item 5, and that's my Lord Mayor's business. A few items here for information. I would like to make you aware, I know some of you are, that I have a multi-faith event happening next week Thursday at the Lord Mayor's Chapel that everyone is welcome to attend. We will be having a discussion or thinking about conflict resolution. That will be at 7 p.m. next Thursday, just across the road in the Lord Mayor's Chapel. I would also just like to highlight that I've been quite busy doing a schools tour of South Bristol, and I would really like to say how impressed I've been by all the children that I've met, some fantastic talent and enthusiasm and energy. It was a great experience on the tour, which is ongoing, and also to say how important I think it is for reading recovery. Less positive elements now, of course, and in a moment I'm going to ask that we take a minute's silence as a mark of respect for two events, of course, the terrorist attacks in Christchurch, New Zealand on Friday, and equally on Friday, Bristol's twin city of Beira, Mozambique, which has been hit by a cyclone. There is a fund surfer initiative that's been set up. Hopefully members have had that information circulated. It will be, I hope, on the council website. It's already out there on Twitter. So there is a relief fund coming from this city for Beira, which, as I've said, is our twin city and has experienced a lot of devastation. So if I could now ask that we all stand for a minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we get into agenda item 6 now, which is the public forum. And there'll be 2 public forum sessions at this meeting. The first will be to pick up general matters received within the usual deadlines. Items of public forum that relate to item 12 will be heard at that item, so they'll come a little later. And we have half an hour, 30 minutes for this part of the meeting. So approximately 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petitions, statements and questions received have been circulated amongst the members. So we have 2 public petitions, and if the representatives are here, they're entitled to speak to that petition for a minute, just to present it. So first of all, we have David Beasley, or do we have David Beasley? Please shout or wave.
I'm Simon Lawman. I did email Lucy. David Beasley's actually ill, so he's actually handed it to me just to pass on, if that's okay. It's signed by 161 people. We, the undersigned, call on the Mayor to ensure that parking restrictions in the Aurora area of Cheswick Village include a residents' parking zone rather than a simple yellow line approach. Residents have now spent 2.5 years battling for this simple goal, but these calls have so far fallen on deaf ears. Yellow lines will not solve the problem. We'll only constrict the available parking and push the problems onto other areas of the village. A more robust approach, including a residents' parking zone, is needed. And that's from David Beasley, and I've got that here.
Okay, thank you for reading that on his behalf. So the other petition is from Dr. Victoria Stanford and Dr. Ellen Wood. Is Dr. Ellen Wood here? Great, you are. And this is regarding Bristol's unhealthy air.
Yes, hello. My name is Dr. Ellen Wood. Our petition has been signed by 70 healthcare professionals. So we as healthcare professionals have long recognised the devastating impact of air pollution on the health of our patients. Air pollution plays a role in cancer, stroke, heart disease, asthma, diabetes, obesity, and changes linked to dementia, and is contributing to around 40,000 early deaths each year in the UK. Particles from exhaust emissions can cross the placenta, stunting fetal development, and can lead to premature birth. Pollution also suppresses the growth of children's lungs, increasing their risk of asthma and infections like pneumonia. There is evidence that those in the lowest income neighbourhoods are amongst those most affected by air pollution due to their proximity to busy roads, yet these same people are responsible for emitting lower than average amounts of air pollution, meaning that those least responsible for the problem are most affected by the health impacts. Research published this month has shown that air pollution now causes more deaths worldwide than smoking. The difference is that you have a choice with smoking, but we cannot choose the air that we breathe.
Thank you. That's over the minute. Thank you for speaking to that. So we now move to public statements. And in terms of the procedure, I would like to remind members of the public of the following. It's a maximum of 1 minute that is allocated for the presentation of each statement. So the statement has been circulated, but if you would like to say anything else about it, you can. So please do summarise what you'd like to say. So in dealing with these statements, I'm going to try to allow as many people as possible to speak. And I'm trying to ensure that each of the topics that are raised also get highlighted. So I'm going to start and work through those that have indicated that they are attending. So is Oliver here? He is, great. So we'll start with you, and I'm not sure what the topic is.
It's inclusivity, or rather a lack of it. So I'd like to start by saying, after attending a cabinet meeting for the first ever time, Marvin Rees ran after me, cornered me, and asked me what I was doing to tackle racism. I was at the meeting to talk about library cats. Since then, it has come to light that Bristol City Council, the organisation for which he is mayor, is institutionally racist. In addition to being considered racist, the council has as one of its city partners an organisation which has an active policy of discrimination in place against same-sex couples who wish to get married there. That is St Mary Redcliffe Church. So I challenge our mayor to tell us what he is doing to tackle homophobia, and call upon him to demand that his city partners stop discriminating against LGBT+ people if he expects the people of Bristol to take his claims seriously that Bristol City Council is genuinely committed to inclusivity.
Okay, statements are just to be noted. There isn't a response to statements. The next statement is from Mr. Redgewell.
Should be brief. First of all, just to say I welcome the Metro Light Rail Rapid Transit study, which I now understand is positive towards going on to the next phase of producing a comprehensive light rail, heavy rail metro system for the city region. I welcome the mayor's involvement in all of that. On buses, I just want to say the quickest way to spend money on buses is through the Advanced Quality Partnership, sign the deal with First Group, and get on and get the 5-minute frequency. Wasting lots of money on going down franchising or going down the lines of trying to buy bus companies. It's just distraction from what the passengers want. They want service. They want to serve those hard-to-reach estates, including places like Sea Mills, including places like Southmead, South Bristol, parts of Bristol where they don't have decent bus services. They're usually the working-class estates. That's what we need to concentrate on, not messing around trying to buy bus companies or franchising vehicles. That's what passengers want, a decent bus service. And I get on with this deal with First Group and Stagecoach as soon as possible through Advanced Quality Partnership and also setting fare levels, particularly getting those socially excluded areas with bowl bus services. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Christopher Harris? No? Okay. So then we now go to Alan Preece. Is Alan here? Yeah.
Thank you, my Mayor, my Lord Mayor. When I was chair of the Stoke Bishop Forum, I had the privilege to have 4 meetings with Cottam to discuss the proposal to fence the whole of Stoke Lodge. And during those meetings, they were totally unwilling to compromise over having locked fencing. So as a result, I applied to the council in December 2017 to register 5 footpaths across Stoke Lodge. And the pro team suggested that 4 of these were viable, and so I submitted 152 supporting statements from the public, and the 4 paths were declared duly made in May 2015. What has happened now is that there is a fence, it is mostly locked, and we can see that this has effectively split the north side of Stoke Bishop into 2, which particularly affects young school children at Stoke Bishop Primary School. They have now to take an alternative route out across a dangerous crossing, and it also affects the elderly like me that attends the Adult Learning Centre, but in particular it also affects wheelchairs, anyone using wheelchairs and buggies who cannot now access the field at any time. I'm fine, I can drive a car. Well, why cannot the council force Cottam to do proper impact assessments before throwing up these structures? And why were they allowed to despoil the best green and wildlife important area in Bristol?
And the next statement is back to David Redgewell, if you'd like. Muller Road proposals, apparently.
Well, just to make the point that Muller Road and the Westbury-on-Trim to Cribbs Causeway and to the city centre are very important bus structures and bus infrastructure for delivering the Mayor's transport policy of getting people out of their cars and onto public bus services. We've got to get it right. We've got to work with communities in Westbury, Southmead, Henleys and Brentry, and across that route to Clifton, and also Muller Road and up to Creswick and South Gloucestershire. But we cannot let these two bus schemes drop. If we want to get people out of their cars onto public transport from the new developments in Creswick and Lochleys and delivering the Mayor's housing policy, and also delivering the 5,500 housing units on the YTL site with the arena, we need to make sure there's public transport. And that needs to be through an advanced quality partnership with First Route and Stagecoach. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Susan Mayer? Yes?
Is this a scene from Orwell's Animal Farm? Who is the real author of this latest barn door proclamation from Bristol City Council? How can Stoke Lodge, a recognised open space, be violated without protest just to satisfy a spurious health and safety claim? Uniquely, prior to the imposition of a fence on Stoke Lodge, there was no planning consultation, no independent wildlife assessment, no consideration of established rights of way, no consideration for public disabled access, no consideration of ancient TPO tree roots. Accusations fly on Twitter and Facebook, but this is actually more about transparency in local government, individual integrity, and the right way to handle a dispute. Just because someone says something in an authoritative way, that doesn't make it a fact. So if this petition is to be prohibited, show us the evidence that forbids its airing in public. Thank you.
Do we have Andrew Varney? Yes, from Bristol Cycling Forum.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'd like to draw the Council's attention to a promise that was made by the administration to the Bristol Cycling Forum that appears now to have been broken. In August 2018, we had a rare visit by the Cabinet member with responsibility for transport at that time. And we were promised that a representative from the Bristol Cycling Forum would be permitted to attend meetings by the new Bristol Transport Board. I'm afraid that no such invitation has been received. Perhaps it's got lost in the post, who knows. But also, since that time, all funding and support for the Bristol Cycling Forum has now been withdrawn. Now, it seems to me that this council, this administration, is very good at talking about the need to do something about congestion, to improve air quality, but the very people who might be able to have some positive input on these matters are now being marginalised and ignored. So I ask the Mayor and the administration, please to keep your promise and make sure that a representative from the Bristol Cycling Forum is invited onto the new Bristol Transport Board. Thank you very much.
Do we have Tony Jones? Okay, good. Can I ask you to speak right into the microphone, please, so it's picked up on the webcast?
I would urge councillors to debate and support the motion on AVON Pension Fund, disinvestment and diversification. The Council has already voted across party lines to work for Bristol to become carbon neutral by 2030. To achieve that goal and to support wider moves to combat global warming, a wide range of actions needs to be taken. Pension fund disinvestment is one of those actions. The science of global warming is unequivocal. We face a climate emergency, and this evening, Bristol councillors can show that they will work together to help to avert a future catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Martin Garrett? Good.
Hello. WECA now has legal powers to franchise buses. It worked in London with massive resources to organise services and contracts and ticketing by TfL. They hold the legal monopoly. Operators compete to run services. Attempts outside London fail. WECA do not have such resources and are against supporting bus services. Franchising on the cheap leads to fragmentation of services. A way forward: more bus priority on our roads, reduce space for cars, bus interchange hubs, sustainable energy. It's in the TFGB bus plan. WECA is not capable of bus franchising. We need a Labour or even a Liberal Democrat Metro Mayor and a Labour government to finance modal shift to fight climate change. Thank you.
And time for one more statement. Is Emma Burgess here? Yes, good. So, last statement.
Good evening. I'm just one of thousands of Bristolians that your monitoring officer has silenced this evening by refusing to let us show you our petition video. We didn't expect to debate the rights or wrongs of planning law here this evening. We expected our council to listen to us. So why bother asking for views on the new green space strategy if you won't listen to a community that is today locked out of our only local green space? Our community is absolutely delighted to see Cottam School pupils back at Stoke Lodge. But yesterday, they used a tiny fraction of the 22 acres for less than 2 hours. But I had to try and explain to my child why the gates were locked for the entire 24 hours. Go there now, and you will see a once beautiful and unique place that you designated as important open space, and it is empty. It is surrounded by a mile-long, 2-metre-high fence, and its gates are locked. So please help us. Get our claimed public rights of way application heard in the next few months, not years. Please, please help people with disabilities in our area get some level, accessible entrance to Stoke Lodge. Because this evening, they cannot get into their only green space, even if it were unlocked.
Thank you. We will not be able to get through we won't be able to get through many questions if we have rapturous applause on every single answer, I'm afraid. So whilst it's encouraging, if we could keep it brief, we'll get through more questions. Thank you for your statements. That concludes that element of the meeting, and the statements have been noted. So we move on to public questions. And again, we'll try and work through as many as we can. We have a number of them. They have been circulated and they will also be displayed on the screen. The Mayor or the relevant Cabinet member will reply verbally to the questions, and each questioner will be allowed to ask a supplementary if they wish. So we're going to start with Dr. Victoria Stanford or Dr. Ellen Wood. I know Ellen is here. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Bristol Council is right to be concerned about the affordability of a clean air zone for its citizens. However, the Mayor's primary concern must be the devastating cost of air pollution to human health. We would like to know how the inaction on cleaning up our air is justified and what equality-focused measures the Mayor is considering alongside the clean air zone to mitigate its costs for those who can least afford them, are contributing least to the problem and who are suffering the most.
So it's obviously a very timely issue, so just indulge me. I've got 4 points to respond to your paper. First of all, there's been some misinformation around it. I don't know where this idea is coming from that nothing is being done. We've got a whole docket, and this is one of the points we made to the Minister. And I think we need to be careful in listening to national government's relationships when they say stuff about local government. We have, at the moment, as Dave referenced earlier on, actually, a bus deal coming through that includes a quality partnership. We've got the largest order of biogas buses coming through. That bus deal will put us on track to having all of the buses in Bristol, 100% of the buses on biogas. We are investing through our development plans in the cycling and walking infrastructure. In the city plan, there is a particular track around the environment that will have purchase across learning, education and skills, homes and communities, transport. The fact that we have a specific board coming up around the environment that set out goals for Bristol for every year up to 2050 is some achievement, as has been recognised in other around the rest of the country and so forth. And I would also say that on Thursday, when I go to our workshop on the industrial strategy, the local industrial strategy, as I shared with councillors earlier on, the point I'm going to be making is that that industrial strategy must hold economic inclusion, tackling poverty and inequality, but also sustainability. And when we build it into the plan, that goes some way of anchoring it in. The second thing I'll just raise is about the clean air plan. Now, there has been a delay in our initial submission to DEFRA, but we've talked to the Minister and Jackie about this. We don't have a government that's actually wedded to deadlines in any meaningful way right now. And our point has been that this deadline has no bearing on the city's ability to reach compliance. So actually what we had was a red flag around the impact on the poorest people in Bristol and the plans that are being brought forward. It's incumbent upon us to have a look at the impact that would have had. Secondly, I'd say in terms of what we are doing around trying to take mitigating actions on the poorest people, we are part of UK 100. We've asked the government, and I sat around the table with Michael Gove, along with Andy Burnham, Sadiq Khan, Andy Street from the Midlands, and we said to Michael Gove, this was before this all was in the papers, this is a year or so, we want to deliver air quality. But you can't keep rolling down responsibility onto cities without resourcing it. We need another £1.5 billion in the Clean Air Fund, and we need your national support for a diesel scrappage scheme. That way we can support private citizens to move from diesel to electric vehicles, but also we can work with our taxi fleet. The final two things. I've got to take issue with the way this has been framed as well. Air quality is a primary concern, along with a number of other primary concerns. I've been at pains to say we don't have a hierarchy of what we're doing here. It's air quality, or it's poverty, or it's poverty, or it's air quality. We're trying to do them all at the same time. As a health professional, you'll know from the Marmot Review and from the If I Could Only Do One Thing report about public health, that socioeconomic factors are by far and away the biggest determinant of population health. And actually, I had Duncan Selby here just a week ago Monday, and he wrote to me yesterday, and what he said was, in terms of delivering on population health, and you know who Duncan Selby is, right? Yeah. So what he said was, for children, having the best start in life and being ready to start school are important. And for young people, it's entering adulthood with the resilience to thrive. For adults, it's having a secure job, home, and at all stages, the importance of friendship and belonging in life. Essentially, economic growth, creating new jobs that local people can get with health and well-being are two sides of the same coin. We are not trading off economic growth against the environment. What we're saying is sometimes they clash, but we have to deliver on all of those at the same point. And what I would also say is there's a real political danger for the environment in further marginalising people from the economy. The kind of politics you make possible when people lose hope that they will ever get out of the spiral of poverty is an anti-environmental politics. And final point, Lord Mayor, the NHS generates 5% of all road journeys in this country, okay? So this is on NHS's own numbers. All right, they contribute 735 deaths from air pollution. They cost us 8,844 life years, contribute to 85 deaths and 772 major injuries, and they create £650 million worth of demand on NHS services. So I would say as an NHS professional, what would also be good is don't wait for the council. The NHS is a massive institution. It's a sovereign body. Look at your own transport plans. I'll be interested to know what's been going on inside the NHS, what you're doing around transport plans to take the burden you bring onto our roads. And I would also be interested to know what you're doing to ensure that the NHS is transferring all of its diesel vehicles over into electric or biogas.
We don't really have the resources to do that, as somebody has said.
But you're here.
Unfortunately, there isn't another supplementary. It's only one, unfortunately. But thank you for your question and thank you for the full answer. But if we could try and keep it as close to 3 minutes as possible so that we can get through.
I'll be happy to talk to you after, because I think there is this thing about people just coming down to council and thinking the council just delivers everything. The NHS is a huge organisation, and I think one of the best places to start is with your own organisation as well as with the council.
It's one of our clinical responsibilities on our NICE guidance to reduce our own impact on air pollution.
Great. So we're going to move on to the next question now, and it's 2 questions. So it's Oliver Fortune, and he has 2 questions on inclusivity and also the new community hub. Do you have, you're entitled to a supplementary on each of those.
Right. Okay. So was it the one about inequality? I can't see the question. I can see one about air quality. Here we are, yes. We'll go back to the one about inclusivity.
Is Judith Brown here? I was told she wasn't attending, and she isn't attending, so that's why we've moved on to Oliver Fortune.
So there was a question, yeah.
No, usually the Mayor is allowed to answer.
Okay, so sorry, Oliver, let's have an answer, and then you can have a supplementary.
Shall I ask the question again?
Sorry for the confusion. I think if the Mayor would like to give an answer to your initial questions, and then you're entitled to a supplementary on both. Okay. Apologies.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we've made clear our commitment to inclusion and diversity in the council and the authority. It goes through the city plan, it goes through our approach to council culture, it goes to our re-establishment of the staff-led groups. I think our record speaks for that. In terms of what the church in the city does, the church by definition is a broad church. If you have a sense of the specific position of that church, or you've got some engagement with them that you're dissatisfied with, I suggest you take it up with them. But our principles stand the way they stand.
That's not the question. The question is, how can you say that you're inclusive when you've got relationships with city partners that you know full well have this policy in place? That's my point. If I was the Mayor of Bristol City Council, I would be saying to these bodies that you need to include everyone in the city, not just heterosexual people. And if they weren't willing to do that, I wouldn't have them as a city partner. That's the question. And also, with regards to your comments about the NHS doesn't have the resources to make all the vehicles we use on biogas. We don't have the resources at the moment, as you know.
I think you're assuming I know more than I do. I don't know that. And actually,
we're living under Tory austerity. You know full well what pressures the NHS are under. But back to this question that you haven't answered.
Stop grumbling, everyone. Right, Mayor, can we just check? Did you give a response to the second part of the question, which was the new community hub in Knoll?
Was I asked that?
Should we focus on that? That was another question, wasn't it?
Let's get an answer to this question, so let's move on to the next one.
I don't know what the question was. Oh, right. So I'll go on to your next one, your next point. I mean, there are no plans to relocate the library service from Broadwalk to a new building at Daventry Road. There are no plans to do that.
Again, that wasn't the question. The question was whether there would be an additional library at Daventry Road. It's not about relocating existing libraries, it's about whether there's going to be a facility there.
Well, then are we, what, in that development, are we going to build a library? Yeah. Well, there's no, I'm not aware of any plans to do that, no.
Okay.
Right. Thank you for your questions. We now move on to Barry Cash, if he's here. Barry? So, can we have the answer?
Yeah, so obviously this is why no one in the council spoke to you. I don't know the answer to that, Barry. I mean, it's a big organisation. Who did you contact?
I rang up and I asked to speak to the recycling department, and I waited 40 minutes, during which time I moved from number 3 in the queue to number 1, and then my phone ran out of battery. So I rang the operator and asked could they ring me, and she said no. So then I said, well, can you put me through to the mayor's office, please? And she refused to do that. So then I sent you an email asking you what to do about it. That was at the beginning of February, and the opportunity to get these grants has now long gone. And I'm very annoyed at it. All we've heard for 10 years is austerity, 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 yet there's a chance for £150,000 to £300,000, and nobody in Bristol City Council, or in fact any of the other councillors around Bristol, would even speak to me about it. Why?
I don't know, Barry. And maybe it might have been in the approach. I don't know. If there's money...
In the approach, why don't you answer an email in 6 weeks? Why didn't they answer the phone or the question?
Okay. In my office, we've pulled the team together and we try and turn our emails around in 2 weeks. We can have a look at if you sent an email and you didn't get a response, then I'll have a look at that. As for phoning up, I call up the council on occasion just to check that people get a response. I get a response. If you didn't get one on that occasion and your phone ran out of power, then I can only say, I'm sorry that happened to you. I hope we do better next time.
But an average of 3 phone calls an hour from the recycling
I'm sorry
department?
about your experience, but we're going to have to move on. I am sorry for that. So I'd like to now try and get a couple more questions in, and we move to Christine Townsend, and this is regarding secondary school preferences. And could you give your answer so that we can have the supplementary, please, Mayor? I've gone to people who have indicated that they're definitely attending.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was a very precise question with some very precise numbers asked for, and I think those have been shared with you in the table, right?
No, I'm not.
No? Well, then we'll have to make sure the table's shared with you. I've got in here that you asked for the percentage of families not offered first choice, is that right? And then weren't offered any of their choices at all? And that, okay, so, well, I can read the table out to you, I can read elements of it from BS1, percentage not given first preference but offered lower preference, 11.1%, and the same 11.1% for those not getting any of their preferences. The lowest number of people not getting their first, maybe that's the best way to do it, and then you can have the table after. The lowest number of people not given their first preference but offered a lowest preference was 4%, and that was in BS7 and BS4. The highest was 25%, and that was in BS15. The percentage getting not getting any of their preferences, the lowest is 4.3% in BS11, and the highest is 15% in BS10. Those are the bookends, and the full table can be shared with you, so you have all those percentages.
Okay, thank you. So my follow-up to that is, with reference to a cabinet meeting from September the 19th, 2017, which took the report from the then People's Scrutiny around school admissions. One of the recommendations that you, as the Mayor and the Cabinet, endorsed, and I quote, was that you require that all new and expanding schools which receive capital investment from Bristol prioritise Bristol pupils as part of their admission criteria. So I would like to ask why it is that your administration has not implemented that, because we've had numerous secondary schools that have received capital investment and still fail to prioritise Bristol students over non-out-of-area Bristol applicants.
Okay, well, let me let Anna come back on that as our Cabinet Lead for Education and Skills.
So a couple of things on that. The first thing is that obviously there is parental choice, and whether we agree with that or not, that does exist. I always recommend, and in fact I do it myself with my own children, that people put a local school in their choices of schools. So I can see that our figures do look high compared to neighbouring authorities, as I'm sure you'll know, and we will send you across that whole table that Marvin referred to, so you can see that. But we do have some schools which select who they take children in. It's not something that I advocate. but that does exist in the city at the moment. In terms of the capital investment in that, we need to expand schools which are oversubscribed and parental choice is part of that. So actually, you know, if I'm thinking about the cabinet papers I've taken through in my time, one of them is Bristol now, which has a geographical catchment area entirely. It has greatly expanded and population has grown in that area. That's one of the ones that's expanded, so that would not have been linked to that the report that you're referring to. And I think one of the things that you may also be referring to, linking to a discussion at the last schools forum, is around, which is the financial, an elected financial body that discusses finances for schools. There was a vote at schools forum about removing money from schools which take children from out of Bristol, and schools forum voted against doing that. There's no precedent to do that anywhere else in the country, and it was felt that it would really disadvantage schools who have children in them. In fact, there was a comparison made to Brexit and being a bit kind to people coming across our borders at times, I think, and the feeling from all the elected, which doesn't include me, from all the elected head teachers and representatives, well, the majority vote was that we should continue with our growth fund, which means that schools can expand if they've got more pupils. An example is St Bees that you give is a Catholic school. It does serve children in South Gloucestershire, and there is a preference that comes from some of those parents. As an administration, we don't feel that parents who choose that school and have that as their nearest Catholic school should be penalised for doing so. I realise that might not be your view. It's where we may agree to disagree.
Can I have my second question?
Yeah, was it 2 questions? Yeah. If so, yes, you can.
Okay, so my second question is, the first preferences for this year for secondary schools was just under 72%. That is now, it's been the lowest in the Southwest for a number of years. It's now one of the lowest in the country in terms of first preferences for our families. As the statistics that you just read out demonstrate, is a postcode lottery. So my second question is, what are you actually doing to make sure that the outstanding schools that refuse Bristol children places and allocate those places to kids that don't live in Bristol, what are you actually doing about encouraging and trying to change that choice of practice that those schools operate with?
Is it all right to answer this, Stephen? So there are 3 state schools in Bristol that select pupils, not on geography. If you're referring to sort of as an example of that, there are 3 key schools that are the ones I think you're referring to. In fact, I had a discussion with one of them yesterday, and you change those things, but we don't have the power to insist on admissions policy. We do not in this chamber have that power. If we are aggressive in the way we speak to those schools and demand that they do things that they do not feel comfortable with and their governing bodies do not feel comfortable with, we cannot make those movements. Most of our schools are academies, which means they are not under local authority control. That means that we rely on our relationships with them. And in fact, a comment was made about some of the members of Schools Forum and the way that perhaps people have been spoken to in schools has meant that they have not therefore felt there could be a dialogue around actually changing their admissions policy. You'll be aware that Cathedral, for example, have and did say that, in fact, something that they found quite difficult in those discussions was that there was quite a lot of aggression directed towards them.
Well, I wasn't involved in it.
Okay, well, it wasn't from me, it was just a comment that was made.
Right, okay. Unfortunately, we're just going to be able to squeeze one last question through. It is frustrating, and I personally don't think we have enough time, and we need to have more time. But it's one question, and this is coming from Graham Donald, if he's here. Can we have a response and then a supplementary, if you have it? Please.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, Graham, this is just to point out, this is a consultation. It's not a delivery plan. And just to bring clarity on what the proposals are, they're not about mitigating additional traffic, but they are about what we can do to introduce the infrastructure, allow us to bring bus prioritisation down the route as well. So what we're aiming to do with it is really important to understand so that we don't end up misinterpreting as we go back upstream. We are not, as an authority, setting out to spend money to benefit South Gloucestershire, but we do need to be coordinated with South Gloucestershire because as authorities we are interdependent. They are part of our travel to work area, and if people in South Gloucestershire are driving into the city, that's going to have an impact on our own transport infrastructure. Beyond that, we know that houses are coming. There is major housing numbers coming through on that border of the city. And as I've been saying across Bristol, actually, it is a nice problem to have in some sense that we're facing the challenge of building houses, the challenges that come with building houses after not building houses for so many years. But the changes are coming, the houses are going to come, and we have to put the infrastructure in place. Just to clarify on your point on the funding as well, which is a little bit of a misunderstanding perhaps, the funding identified for the works is not Bristol City Council's. It's approximately 1.9 million from the West of England Combined Authority and 5 million coming from the developers of the Cribs Patchway new Neighbourhood site itself. So we just need kind of clarity on that before this thing runs away with misunderstandings and suggestions and so forth.
Well, thank you for that answer, and you can be sure that I have read the proposals and responded to them. Are you aware, I hope you are aware, of the level of anger and the number of objections that there are from people across North Bristol to these proposals, to people's concern about how they will even be able to access their own homes? Will you be revising your proposals in the light of these objections? Will you be listening to the local community? And will you consult again properly this time?
Well, you say that it's important because in your question you said, why is Bristol Council taxpayers being money be spent on these proposals? So all I'm saying is, on a few points, sometimes the misunderstanding is betrayed in the question. There have been a few points raised in my time sitting in this chair where people are coming with a massive misunderstanding that if it is reported like that is wrong. So it's not council taxpayers' money being spent on this. But we are aware of the strength of feeling. But as I said, this is a consultation, and by definition, this will be about taking on board the views of people with the lived expertise, distinguishing between those and opportunistic campaigners, and then obviously marrying those up with the insights and the expertise of transport planners. We do that in every instant, not just this one, but we do that in every development that we engage in. And of course, and Darren Jones is doing sterling work up there as well, holding these community meetings, as are we holding community meetings, to make sure that the views and the expertise of people in the area are fully reflected in the plans that come forward. But we do have to do something because we need to bring the bus prioritisation to support the numbers of houses and the pressure on the transport system that's coming our way.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. I'm sorry.
My Lord Mayor, I wonder if I could make a plea. Most of the people in the gallery are here to talk about Stoke Lodge. There are questions from Stoke Lodge. It would be really kind of you if you'd allow one question from Stoke Lodge.
Are members in agreement to that? That was a loud aye. So it's my last meeting to chair, so I'm going to allow one. I don't want us to go past 7 o'clock because then it keeps it nice and neat for me to time the next section. So if we can go to Helen Powell, who would have been the next person on the list, which 24. Is question number 23. 24. So we'll just wait for the response, which I hope will be relatively brief, and then a brief supplementary, if you please. Okay, yeah, I mean, it is, as I've said numerous times, I do actually have no power over this. The security fencing was installed under permitted development rights rather than a planning application, which means that responsibility rests with the Public Rights of Way and Greens Committee. They advise investigation into the Stoke Lodge playing fields application for rights of way will commence in late 2020. You need to pursue it through the correct committee. But I've always said I'll come out to meet, and I hope that both sides, all sides in this dispute, can actually sit around the table and find some way of crafting a way forward. Well, I've seen people come together across bigger divides in the world. I don't think it's right. And that response.
You spoke just a moment ago about sometimes misinformation and misunderstandings being reflected in the question. Sometimes it's also reflected in the answer. I have brought for you tonight a copy of the lease, and I've highlighted the relevant phrase for you. The lease between Cottam School and the council for Stoke Lodge Plainfields prohibits the erection of any buildings or other structures at Stoke Lodge. Consent from BCC is completely irrelevant. It would require a deed of variation, and there isn't one of those. So, my question is, does it surprise you that your officers apparently think that for some reason unknown to normal English usage, a 1.5 kilometre long, 2 metre high metal fence that's concreted into the ground is not a structure?
Yeah, I mean, the team have taken legal advice and it's deemed not to be a structure. I mean... I initially come back. Look, first, can I just say... First of all, if that's... Honestly, we've talked about the need to be able to sit around the table with people and have a conversation, right, about
Can we have a bit of order, please, and a bit of respect so that we can actually get the reply? Thank you.
What I'm saying is, okay, one is about the approach, right? We talked about the need to be able to sit around the table with people and have a conversation. If the culture has gone to that, whereby when I just inform you that the legal advice received by our officers said that the fence is not deemed to be a structure, all right.
On a point of order, why am I being denied confidentially to see that council's advice? As a ward councillor, I've been denied it. I have written and said I promise to sign a form that I will keep it totally confidential, but I've still been denied it. You're gagging us. And the answer is that I should, and my colleague, should be able to read that, and we're happy to sign a form of confidentiality. Why are you quoting things? Have you seen it? Have you been allowed to see it?
I've been told you've had a formal response, and the Mayor would like to respond to what you've just said.
Let me just go back to the first point. We've talked about the need for people to be able to sit around a table and have a conversation. Every time I mention that, people start laughing. I don't understand. How are you going to be able to do that can I just... I'm going to get interrupted.
Right, I think we're going to close it down now because it's getting tiring and exhausting and it's not going anywhere.
The point is, Peter, that you made a charge
and we're at 7 o'clock.
I just want to put on record, you made a charge that I'm gagging you, Peter, and I don't think... did you make a charge that I was gagging you, or was that a charge directly to me that I'm gagging you? Okay.
Right. Few deep breaths, and we're going to conclude this section now. This section is over. We move on. Would be agenda item 7, petitions notified by councillors, and there isn't any. So we move on to what has been bumped up the agenda. If you're leaving, please do so quietly. Thank you for attending. So, right. Has everyone had the chance to stretch? No, if you haven't, let's stretch. Shake ourselves out. Right, so we move on. As I said earlier, this particular agenda item has been moved up the agenda from item 12, and the following procedure will apply. Firstly, the external auditors will present the report referring to points of clarification which members have submitted in advance. Then we will consider items of public forum, including from councillors, which have been received. 10 minutes will be allocated to public forum from members of the public, and statements followed by questions, and 20 minutes will be allocated to public forum from councillors, statements followed by questions. That relates to the amount of questions and statements we've had in from either public or members. Members will then debate the recommendations and the council's response. The Mayor will then respond prior to a vote on those recommendations. This item was published by way of 2 reports, one on the 11th of March and one on the 13th of March. Firstly, I formally move that we suspend standing orders relating to the presentation of items as officers from BDO will present the report. I also move that we suspend standing order CPR 10.3A, which relates to the altered deadline for questions pertaining to this item. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Great. So can I now ask David Eagles from BDO to address the Chamber? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. It's a fairly brief report. I wasn't going to spend a lot of time talking about the content, just to focus really on the main scope of this, which is that it's a report which is consistent with our responsibilities as appointed auditors under the National Audit Office Code of Audit Practice. And our responsibilities focus on the audit of the financial statements of the Council and also considering your use of resources arrangements. So it's within that sort of scope that we have undertaken our work. And the key issues relating to this sort of final payment to the ex-Chief Executive is summarised on page 3 of our report in the executive summary. The key issues being relating to the interpretation of the contractual nature of the payment and also the route with which the decision was made and the transparency of that information provided. The focus of the report is on those areas where we consider that there are continuing issues that needed to be addressed, things which hadn't been already superseded by other events. So the recommendations made in the appendix at the back, those statutory recommendations, and those are recommendations which are required to be considered in public, which is what's happening this evening, and also copied through to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Those recommendations that we have made, which are statutory in nature, are, I think, relatively straightforward, but are seeking to address those areas of the Council's arrangements, which, as I said, have not already been dealt with and have sort of persisted beyond this sort of case. So I wasn't going to talk any more about the content of the report, but really to just address those points of clarification that we've received in writing up to this point.
Okay, thank you. So we will now turn to the public forum, and we have, sorry. Sorry, so now we're going to have some clarification, to some of the questions that members posed.
Okay, so in response to the first, the public question from Barry Cash, in terms of what's actually in the public domain, the key drivers for this are, in terms of the recommendations, those areas where, as I said earlier, we are, there's this continuing relevance, in other words, where things have not already been addressed or have been superseded. So that's the main driver for the content of the report, but also we have to be very wary of not reporting sensitive personal information.
Okay, is there a supplementary then from... No?
Thank you for your answer, but surely councillors cannot be expected to approve a report where only one quarter is visible.
Sorry, apologies for that. There's some confusion here. I have this as you've said what you wanted to say, and then we go into public statements and then public questions. You've just responded to a query from Barry Cash, is that right?
Yes.
Is this the question or is this something else? Right, so we're dealing with clarification and then we move on to questions. Okay? So how many more clarifications do we have? Because I don't have a note of this. Okay. So all the clarifications will come up on the screen and you'll deal with them. And then, then we'll move into the public statements and the public questions. Okay, please continue.
Thank you. In response to Councillor Davies' question, in terms of the length of time, this is a very complicated issue with an awful lot of ground to cover, with the discontinuity of staff to speak to who are involved in the process, but also we have to be very careful about balancing the sensitivity of personal data. In terms of the draft being issued, the very first draft for discussion was issued on the 3rd of December 2018, but we are not aware of that having been released more widely. In response to Councillor Hopkins' questions, in terms of the legal position, the report states that the initial legal advice relating to the contractual status of the payments was obtained without the involvement of the Council's legal services. I'm not able to provide any further details on the legal advice obtained other than to say that the correct approach is for legal advice to be commissioned by the legal services and they have an arrangement, an agreement in place for these services. The question regarding the costs associated to advice provided should be directed to the Council. I can't respond to that.
Right, we're not, sorry, it's confusing, but we're not at the point of questions or follow-ups yet. This is just points of clarification. So let's continue.
Okay. In response to the questions from Councillor Clough relating to issues of recommendations elsewhere, the National Audit Office publication on local auditor reporting that was issued on the 10th of January 2019 and which is available on their website identified that 7 statutory recommendations were made in the last 3 years. That's the only information we have, which is publicly available. 3 in 2016-17, 1 in 2017-18, and 3 within 2018-19. None of those were issued by BDO LLP, who are the appointed auditors to this council for the 17-18 audit. And all reports with statutory recommendations are required to be copied on issue to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. In response to Councillor Clark's questions, in terms of the amounts, the information in relation to the total payment is included in the notes, the accounts, and questions relating to the total payment to Elka Solutions Limited. I cannot respond to that. That needs to be directed to the Council to respond to. Councillor Wright's questions, in terms of the amounts, the transaction salary, national insurance and pension reflected in the original accounting treatment applied to a scenario of contractual payments and payment in lieu of notice, or pile-on. We concluded subsequently these items were in fact not contractual, or at least not completely contractual, and the analysis has been amended in the accounts. And the decisions were taken based upon the various legal interpretations made at the time. In terms of Councillor Negus' questions, just to clarify that the basis for the work, as I mentioned earlier on, and the report presented this evening, this is not a public examination, and we've not been separately commissioned to do this work. This is part and parcel of the code audit which we focus on, which is focusing on the audit of the financial statements and use of resources, as I mentioned earlier. And the element of the work that we're focusing on in the report is that which we consider relevant to the statutory recommendations, and because the issues had not already been addressed or superseded. The other areas are either not that sort of classification and or contain sensitive personal information not for the public domain. And our approach and decisions are consistent with the code audit responsibilities. I had a question from Councillor Kent. But is that gone? Yes. Right. Councillor O'Rourke's questions. The decision in terms of the classification is based, in terms of our report, on conclusions that we now consider to be unclear. So we focused on the documentary evidence relating to that trail, with clarification sought from relevant officers where necessary to understand that documentation. It's not based upon an interview process. The second question, the issues we were addressing did not require further interviews. It's not a forensic review nor a legal investigation. It's just part of the Code of Audit responsibilities. In terms of timing, I noted in the earlier response, it's a complicated issue with a lot of ground to cover and the discontinuity of key individuals, also balancing that sort of sensitivity of personal information. We cannot release early discussion drafts because they do contain some sensitive personal information. And in terms of whether this sort of compromising our independence, no, absolutely not. And I can't release any further sort of confidential information. That's the final question. We have one final question, which is from Councillor Stevens. I cannot disclose the terms of the contract, that's confidential. The contract was signed before September 2017, but again, I cannot make reference to the specific terms because they are confidential.
Lord Mayor, there was actually a question for me. I'm Councillor Kent. Is it because the question's gone missing, or do you want me to read it to you?
I can respond to the question, which related to budget setting process. Just to be clear,
if members can't see the question, do you want me to read it out?
Is it possible to have the question come up?
I mean, is that quicker? I can read it very quickly.
I'm a bit baffled as to where the question is, to be honest.
I have it in front of me, so shall I just read it out and then you can answer it and we can move on?
If you're happy to.
Okay, so my question was, the Mayor has publicly questioned your fitness as auditors with regards to the previous administration's budget set in February 2016, and you did not comment on this. Please explain your role in the budget setting process and the signing off of the budget. At what point, as an external auditor, would you be expected to comment on such a budget? Do you feel this in any way should reflect on the report you are making to us today? Thank you.
Okay. As independent auditors, we have no role to play in the budget setting process. We are entirely independent of that. And our assessment of relevant arrangements for budget setting is entirely independent of the Council. The auditor may consider budget setting arrangements as part of a sort of risk-based assessment of use of resources, and this historical position, which dates back to before this year of audit, is not relevant to the audit which I'm undertaking in respect of 17-18, and is no relevant to the report which we're presenting this evening.
Thank you. Right, hopefully everyone's still with us, because we're now going to turn to the public forum. So we're going to have statements, and we have just one statement, and that's Graham Donald. So would you like a minute to speak to the statement?
I would, thank you very much. I hope I'm not going to be accused of opportunism on this occasion, since I've asked a number of questions about this previously, and I've been fobbed off at every turn. And on the last time, it emerged that the severance payment made had been larger than we'd been told, and the payment made hadn't been contractual, contrary to what the Mayor had said publicly in this very council chamber. What I draw from this report is 4 points. The key underlying issue of transparency has still not been addressed. The lack of a recorded decision trail made it impossible to achieve a definitive conclusion. This is a polite way of saying that the City Council has succeeded in relying on its own inadequacies and turpitude to conceal the truth. External legal advice was sought without first consulting the City Council's own legal services, and the specification and scope of the advice weren't clear. It's not surprising, therefore, that the advice turned out to be wrong. And then finally, the City Council didn't seek approval of its own HR committee in respect of a significant severance payment made to the head of its own paid service. As a Bristol resident, I'm embarrassed to read such an indictment of poor practice. It's truly shameful. I live in hope that even if the errors of the past aren't admitted, the recommendations in this report will be implemented, enabling the City Council to clean up its act.
Thank you, Graham. You can keep hold of the microphone, because we're going straight into your question in a moment. I'm presuming you have a supplementary, but first let's get your response to your initial question.
So, thank you for your question. I mean, what we agree is that the council has never had appropriate procedures in place to manage the departure of senior staff, and I support the BDO recommendations and hope your party does the same tonight.
So thanks for that reply. I'm sure that the elected Lib Dem councillors will decide their stance themselves. Unlike some other parties, Lib Dem councillors aren't controlled by unelected party members. Wouldn't you agree, Marvin, that the council's in a parlous state if the records are so bad that the auditors can't tell what's been going on, who decided what, or what terms external lawyers were instructed on?
Yeah, I don't recognise, I mean, what you're saying here. All I would say is that we, as an authority, and this really is pretty straightforward, actually, there were no procedures in place in the council, no appropriate procedures in place to manage the departure of senior staff. This is one of the things we've been trying to put right in the organisation. And we take the recommendations that have come out of the BDO report, we accept them, we'll support them tonight, and we hope your party does the same. That's our responsibility to the city.
Right, so we move on now to Mary Page. Is Mary here? Great, so can we have the response to the first question, please, Mayor?
Yeah, it was our senior team who took the external legal advice. And question 2 as well. Do you want to
ask your supplementary to just that first question?
The answer to my question, and a lot of questions, seems to be, it wasn't me. A lot of the responses to the questions, and there are so many, too many unanswered questions to this sorry situation. One might say, to lose one senior executive could be considered unfortunate. But to preside over an administration that loses 2 senior executives is carelessness under your watch.
Is there a question coming?
I would think that the public, the media, and everyone here would like to know how you could answer the question if you have been profligate with taxpayers' money and careless, because as a member of Bristol TUC and you as a Labour mayor on a Labour council, I cannot believe that there were no custom and practice procedures here in place, and you had one in the HR committee and you chose not to use it, and we would like to know why not.
I've said from the beginning, we are surprised too that there were no procedures in place in this organisation to oversee the departure of senior staff. That's why we support the BDO recommendations to make sure that we put those in place for the future, and I hope the Council does the same. I mean, what I'd say in terms of what you say about the Chief Exec, which is referenced in the leadership of the organisation, when we came in, we set out to make sure there were outside objective eyes on how we progress the reform of this organisation. If you go back to the LGA Peer Challenge from the autumn, hundreds of hours of interviews with councillors, officers and city partners, read what the report says, and having examined this organisation forensically, we opened that. It was a voluntary opening of the doors. They say we put this organisation on the right track, including the quality of the leadership team that we've put in place.
Okay. So now, again, it's 2 questions from Barry Cash. So we seem to be merging all of these, so I guess we'll just have one answer, and then you can have a supplementary.
Yeah, I think it's the same question in many ways. The content of the report is a matter for BDO. The administration had no involvement with the audit or its outcomes.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. I understand the need for confidentiality and that things can't be given to members of the public, like myself. But I don't understand how councillors can be expected to approve a report where only 1 quarter is visible. I mean, what are they for if not to see what's going on in the council?
The report is a matter for BDO. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to interfere with the auditors.
Well, the report falls short of directly reporting any illegality, but it highlights significant failings in the process. What disciplinary action is recommended?
Well, that's why we're supporting all the recommendations in the BDO report to make sure the processes that we need, the council actually gets to ensure its future.
Thank you for the public statements and public questions. We now move into councillor statements, where, again, you'll have a minute to talk to the statement. So we start with Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, 1 minute is not anything like enough to cover this whole vast, rambling scandal. There's 4 areas mentioned in the report at the beginning. We're only seeing one of them. I was struck by a Labour member of Audit Committee saying a few months back that he initially thought that I and other councillors raising the Kronowski scandal, making a fuss about nothing, but he now realised it was serious, and it was why the Mayor did it rather than if it happened at all that was crucial. Audit Committee want full answers. We want full answers. I'm afraid the cover-ups and obfuscation have been going on for far, far too long. When I and others were asking pertinent questions, what we actually got was a member from the party opposite put it in vexatious complaints, which were thrown out by an independent investigator who said that we were acting in the public interest. Yes, we were acting in the public interest, and it's about time the Mayor did as well. It is absolutely shocking, all the aspects of this, right from the beginning, when the recruitment was a shambles, and when, during the 7 months afterwards, we had problem after problem after problem.
I'm afraid that's way over the minute now.
Can I just finish off this one sentence, please? This scandal, which we have not seen the last of yet, is surely the last nail in the coffin of the Mayor's system. If any council leader were faced with a report like this we have today, they would have surely been forced to resign by their own party. Thank you.
Okay, we have another statement from Councillor Eddy. would you like to speak to the statement rather than reading it out?
Of course, Lord Mayor.
And please try to keep
like
to a minute.
Councillor Hopkins, one can't really do justice to it in a minute, but clearly this has been ongoing for, frankly, 2 years. In this very chamber, Councillor Hopkins and myself raised serious concerns about the appointment of the former chief exec. The Liberals and the Tory councillors uniquely voted against her appointment. 6-7 months later, she left, and it now emerges almost £100,000 of taxpayers' money were handed to her. Frankly, many of us suspect it was hush money. Throughout the proceedings, we've sought to probe on a cross-party basis, and it latterly Audit Committee have also looked into this matter, which is important. The key thing, as Councillor Hopkins has said, it's bad enough this has happened. It shouldn't happen again, not in this authority, not in any. So I trust we'll take this seriously, take the recommendation seriously, and I hope if Audit and HR Committee members meet together, we can flesh out a way forward.
Thank you. And now, Councillor Negus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, Audit asked for a full report and they didn't get it, or rather they've got a report which takes up a section of what they asked for to this full council. That's BDO's responsibility. I appreciate that. But there's absolutely no reason why the other 3 parts of that report couldn't have been presented here at the same time. Indeed, the one bit that does come here refers to elements that are not allowed to be here. So how can we have a meaningful conversation about this? In all the time that I've been involved in this council, I've been seeking, and with my group, trying to get openness and transparency in this council so the public can see what goes on. It almost doesn't matter what the committees see, it's the public that we serve that needs to see this. They are not being allowed to see this because the other 3 parts of this report are being shunted to the Audit Commission in a week's time, verbally, and when it's verbal, because it's not written and it can't be redacted and it can't be put in appendices that are more confidential, the whole thing has to be exempt. The public will be thrown out of the room and no one will see the rest of this report, and what's more, they won't be able to even see the bit we put in context. You should consider your position, Marvin. You really should. You conducted a budget report to look at the problems that you'd had with the previous administration. Do the same with the problems you've got with your administration. Make sure that people understand and completely clean this out so we can be a council that people respect and appreciate for doing good things in the right way, openly, so that the people that vote for us and the people that pay their taxes can understand what's being done in their name.
Way over
Thank
now.
you.
Okay, and the last statement from Councillor O'Rourke, please.
I only want to concentrate on one part of the statement, really. I really pushed this forward for the past 18 months because I've always been concerned about the decision-making, the Mayor's decision-making behind this. We've been trying to get clarity and truth on it. For several times I've been told that the Mayor acted within, so every time I asked the question, Marvin said, I acted within the contract. And I knew that wasn't the full story, so I was delighted that it went out to BDO and we would get a full report. I have to say, it's really frustrating to sit here today and to see, like the resident here who says that we're listening to banal answers that are hiding the truth yet again, saying, I acted on legal advice. Really, what we want here today is, honestly, people just really want to know what happened. You can't expect people to believe that discretionary payments were made, though you did have the opportunity to bring it to the HR committee. Several other senior executive decisions came to the HR committee. And the report says that it's exceptional in the fact that this was hidden from it. So again today, I mean, I feel the frustration building in me because it's a complete, it's a disregard of the democratic process. If we're all sitting here today having paid £21,000 for a report, X amount of money to external lawyers, X amount of money in severance pays, and then what's really made me frustrated is I've now been listening for clarification from BDO, and they're telling me that, sorry, this is not a forensic document, it's a document review, and yet in the document they say there's a poverty of a document trail. So we're paying £21,000 for a review of documents which didn't exist because everything is being kept hidden. And I really think the decent, honest thing to do now is to give a straight answer. Don't give these obfuscating answers which are not covering anything. I'll have more to say in a while.
Okay, and we have around 15 minutes now for the questions. So we're going to go to the usual system of going around the parties, and I believe we start with what you'll have on your sheet is question 18. Don Alexander. And so it's Councillor Alexander, Don Alexander, and we'll have the reply, and then you're entitled to your supplementary as usual.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The BDO report rightly emphasises the need for increased transparency.
Sorry, we're having the response, and then you can have the supplementary.
Okay, they may not get the point of my question, but okay.
The question should be up there.
The matter, okay, the matter then, I will cut, yeah, or I will put it more directly then.
No, we don't want to hear the question. We want to have the reply, and then you can have a supplementary.
Oh. I can't even read out my question.
Okay, well, thanks for your question, Don. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We support the recommendations and hope the Council will do too this evening. But clearly, and it's a very important point, these arrangements require all members involved to respect the confidentiality of information made available to them. And that is something that we have to start doing.
The answer wasn't up there. Yeah, the point is, as far as I see it, and this on this side of the House, we most certainly do support more robust and clearer processes. But there seems to me that they are going to fall down at the same point that the HR committee leaks like a sieve when it comes to personal information. And what are we going to do about that at the end of the day?
I don't know. I think that's an issue for the HR committee.
Right. Okay, so the next question is Councillor Gollop, and it's your first question. So we'll have the response now to question 28. Hopefully that will go up on the screen, the question. Everyone got time to have a look at that?
As I have to say, it's a straightforward situation. The legal advice was sought and acted upon by the senior management team.
Lord Mayor, we have the answers. My supplementary is very simple. The Mayor hasn't answered the question I asked. I asked, in the interest of transparency, will you share with members the briefing given to your chosen legal advisor and their response? Does the Mayor not understand that question? Because his answer totally ignored it. It is very simple. It's a fundamental part of where we are today. What were the lawyers asked to provide, and what did they provide? And in the interest of transparency, you either share that with members or this whole thing is a total and utter sham. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Well, detailed legal advice taken in relation to this issue is confidential, as I'm sure you're aware. The initial advice given has already been summarised in the BDO report.
Okay, so we move on to
Lord
the next...
Mayor, sorry, I want a point of clarification here. If members are not to be trusted with confidential advice, We don't even know that it was received, what it said, whether it exists at all. This is unacceptable. There has to be some transparency here that gives us an assurance that what we're being told is true. In a situation where this level of evidence is put forward to show failings on the part of the authority, to be refused access time and time again is not acceptable.
Right, I just wanted to apologise to Councillor Alexander. I hadn't realised you'd had the answer, so we were just going into the supplementary. Sorry that that threw you. It threw me as well. Thank you. So, no, I don't think so. Was that a question? Right. No. I'm sure the same question is going to come up if it wasn't answered. So...
We wouldn't share confidential legal advice. That's a standard council position. Well, I want to work in line with the law.
Right. So
will you tell us which legal firm gave the advice?
We can't have that as another supplementary at the moment, I'm afraid. But if someone else would like to ask it. Right, so we're going to move on to our next question, which is from Councillor Hants. You should have had your answer, so we're just going in with your supplementary question, please.
I have indeed had my answer. Well, a bit of a non-answer. Who in the senior team made the decision? And it's all very well saying in line with the legal advice. Once again, we don't know what the legal advice is. Have to take it on trust. I don't think we do. So it would be nice to have some reasoning behind it, please. And also who actually made the decision within the senior team.
Well, the legal advice I received is evident in the actions we took. The legal advice we received is evident in the actions we took and the process we followed.
Sorry. It's two because there's two questions. Right, there were two questions asked. You did just ask another supplementary, which you're entitled to, but could you just ask it with the mic on?
Right, sorry. Who made the decision within the senior team? Senior team, who was it, please?
The decision was made within the senior team myself at the time, and at the time we had a head of HR and a head of paid service in Nikki and in Jackie and myself and senior team. It's not that the answers are not being earned. It's, they're pretty straightforward, and we'll come back. There was no process in place. We followed legal advice we were given that was contractual and made a decision with the senior team. It's a pretty straightforward situation.
Right, so next question is from Councillor Joss Clark. You've put two questions in, actually, so you've had your answers, so you're entitled to two supplementaries now.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to get round to me, so it's a pleasure, a rare pleasure. Can I just ask, with lessons learnt from this as an authority and moving forward, rather than having the bar set at £100,000 pay off before it comes to full council, can we look at the bar being set at £50,000 so that we have more transparency about any of these decisions in the future?
Yeah, we've got a clear set of recommendations that have come out of this report now that will put us on a firm footing as an authority, and we're going to implement them. That's what we should do, and that's the best thing for this authority in the city.
Are you saying that you're going to implement that, Mayor?
Listen, I just want to clarify. I'm not going to just pull a number out of the air here. What we need to do is go with the BDA recommendations and have a process that brings us to make sure that we have a process that covers the departure of any senior staff.
Right. So let's go to our next question, which is question 19 from Councillor Breckles, please. Do you have a supplementary to ask?
Can I have the answer? I'll have the answer first, and then I'll ask the supplementary on the back of that.
Oh, I've been told you've had the answer.
Oh, right, okay. Have I? I haven't seen it. This is ridiculous. Why am I getting it differently? Everyone else had the answer verbally. Why am I getting it different? I'm just trying to understand.
Would you like to quickly read through the answer so that you can have a supplementary? It's up on the screen.
I haven't seen it.
I'll tell you the answer. Look,
it's not working.
Okay.
No.
There were gaps as the council has never had an appropriate procedures in place to cover these circumstances. We followed the legal advice given at the time. As I said, repeat, it's a pretty straightforward. It's banal answers because it's a banal situation. But look at as I said, in terms of the leadership of the organisation, having opened ourselves up to hundreds of hours of interviews with the LGA challenge, cross-party group senior officers, says the LGA peer review shows Bristol City Council is laying the foundations to underpin its improvement journey. Recently appointed new senior officer leadership team, which collectively has the potential to set a positive direction for the council's workforce. So as part of, in terms of putting a team in place that puts this organisation on a sure footing, that is what we've done. Objective outside eyes have said that. And again, we'll put the recommendations in place and we hope the full council supports that this evening.
Point of clarification, Mayor, if I may.
It's my question, Anthony, not yours. It's my question, Anthony, not yours.
Yeah, can we go to the questioner, please? If we could not interrupt like that. Have you asked a supplementary?
No, I just answered the question.
Right, so you're okay. So now we're going to go to Councillor Eddy. You've submitted 2 questions. Have you had your answers and have you had a chance to read them?
I have, Lord Mayor.
So, okay.
Firstly, can I thank the Mayor for actually sowing his usual fog of conclusion with the first answer. Just to clarify, the city director who left was Nicola Yates, who you paid off with almost 200k in summer 2016. Then back in September 2017, you paid off almost 100k to actually Anna Kulensky. So at what time did you receive the new approach that you needed to tighten senior officer leaving procedure?
It was published after the departure of the ex-chief executive. That's when it came to us.
When?
In September.
I know she left in September.
We received it after.
How convenient, Lord Mayor. My other question is the Mayor aware of the utter contempt bordering, well, frankly, it's discussed among Bristolians over this entire saga? Doesn't he think it utterly besmirches his administration's reputation?
Right.
Will I receive a reply?
A reply to your supplementaries? I'm not sure. Do you usually? Do you usually? Yeah? Okay. Right, so let's go to Councillor O'Rourke.
My questions... no, I didn't get a reply, but I do really want to bottom out the answer to this question, because I think it really gets to the core of this whole problem. I want the Mayor to really answer the fact that if somebody resigns and breaches their contract, they're not entitled to any payouts.
Absolutely right.
It's just, if somebody resigns, that's it. You know, last day, you don't have to pay anymore. So my question, you told me, you know, you give me the answer as we were following legal advice, and you said earlier that things aren't binary. This is actually very binary. It's one of two things. either you do not know a very obvious legal point, and actually in the contract it said you may pay it, not you shall pay it, and anybody will know that the difference between those two key words has very serious legal meaning. So may was discretion. So when you sat there all those times and said you acted within the terms of the contract, clearly implying to everybody that you only gave out money that you had to give out, my question was, did you not know it? Were you ill-informed? Are you not, well, I don't get into all of this, but I'm having to say sort of that fit to do the job. Or did you deliberately mislead everybody? It's one or the other. It's not I followed the legal advice. So it's binary, Marvin. Which is it? Did you not know you didn't have to pay the money? Is that what the legal advice said? Or did you have a problem? And is this pure political expediency? To get rid of that problem, you paid out this money and you have misled the people of Bristol, the taxpayer, and that's why this is going to the Secretary of State. That's what it means when it goes to the Secretary of State. It says this is egregious problem here, needs to have public scrutiny of it. The taxpayers of Bristol, it's here today because the taxpayers of Bristol deserve to know this. And that's why it's going to the Secretary of State. This is not some minor misdemeanor thing. It's big, and we need answers. And that's why you can't just sit there all day and say, I followed legal advice, but I'm not going to tell you the legal advice. And I go back to it. It's binary, Marvin. Did you not know it was discretionary, or did you mislead? And where's the answer?
So it's going to the Secretary of State because that's the process. Secondly, in terms of the root of the problem that you sought out there is simply that there were no processes in place to oversee the departure of senior...
The report says the vast majority of those severance packages did come to HR. And I'd also like to say that the... No, I better not say that.
Right. I think we've covered this. The Mayor, you can respond if you wish to. There was a couple of questions in there, so you've had all your supplementaries. Would you like to respond, or should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I'd love to. As I was just saying just now, it's straightforward. The root of the problem is there were no procedures to oversee the departure of senior staff within the organisation. In that context, you go and get advice, and the important thing to do then as a leader is to follow that advice. And the advice was that this was in the terms of the contract, and we followed it.
My Lord Mayor, can I
But it was
interject,
discretionary.
if I may, just very quickly. This is actually just going round in circles, and we're getting nowhere. Might I suggest we have a little adjournment, and maybe the Mayor actually speaks to his legal team about what he can and can't say, because we're getting no answers, and I'm sure you're having fun and we're having fun too, but this is just going in circles.
Well, that's not going to happen, so it's up to you if you want to keep going in circles. I'm sure everyone still wants to ask their questions. Yes? I think we're going to keep going through the questions. So the next person to ask questions is Councillor Hopkins.
A minute or two ago, the Mayor said that the two people that were involved with the decision were the head of HR, who was acting up, and the head of paid service. Well, the head of paid service is a person who left with a rather large cheque, which most of us feel that we shouldn't have actually had at the time. And the head of HR at the time was somebody who was temporary, had come in a month or two after Ms. Klodowski's made up to Chief Executive, had worked with her at a previous authority, and then agreed with you with the payout, and then left a few weeks after Ms. Klodowski left. Does that cause any concern to you in terms of how it actually looks?
Yeah, that's why we took the advice to make sure we follow the advice in following that process, and it's why we support the BDO recommendations now to make sure we have processes in place to oversee this kind of situation in the future.
do you think it's really appropriate to rely upon advice, so say, which we've not seen? We don't know whether it was requested in writing or verbally. We don't know whether it was responded writing or verbally. We don't know what information was given to these outside lawyers when they came up with their so-called recommendation that suited you. I mean, because at the time it also says that it was thought, or was it thought, that it was a contractual payment. So if they were told that this was a contractual payment, they would come up with one set of answers. If they were told what it actually was,
could we just quickly get to the question,
then they come up
please?
with a different set of answers. So is that appropriate for you to hide behind blank legal advice?
It's legal advice. We take legal advice, and then we take legal advice, and we.
I understand it's a very contentious issue, but if we could just have a bit of, well, it's contentious for some people because that's why they're getting passionate about it. So if we could just have a bit of order, and I'm going to say that I do not like people trying to talk to me from the side. I'm trying to do the best job that I can to chair this meeting, to try and be fair, to try and allow people to say what they need to say. And everyone's perception of what's happened is their perception. I cannot quash people's perception. They're entitled to say what they think and ask their questions. So we now move on. Is there any further response you would like to give to Councillor Hopkins?
I think I just went through it before someone else started speaking. As I said, the problem was there was no procedures. You go out, you find a guide to take you through the process that you have to go through, and you follow the advice.
There's no more supplementaries, I'm afraid.
Blank legal advice. It's legal advice.
That's just not true. We on the HR committee had actually just previously turned down a request for a large payment to a senior officer who came up with exactly the same story as the Mayor claimed for Miss Klonowski. So that's why that Miss Klonowski's case wasn't brought to HR, because he knew what the response might actually be, and he couldn't afford to have things coming out.
Well, with that speculation of information, we're now going to move on to the next question, which is from Councillor Hickman. Do you have a supplementary? No? Okay, so we keep moving then to try and get as many questions as possible, and there's two questions from Councillor Galandris. Do you have any supplementaries?
Yes, my Lord Mayor. Could you tell us, Marvin, it's a very simple question, innocuous, who provided the legal advice, please? Which firm? Was it? My Lord Mayor, it's a very simple question. I don't know why so many people are conferring. What's going on?
I just want to make sure. So, first of all, it's in the report, and Bevan Britton and Geldards.
Thank you.
Is that any more? Is there another question, or is Councillor, are you okay? Is there another question? Okay, fine. So then we move on to Councillor Thomas, please.
Yes, thank you for your answers. In light of the previous comments, BDO is very clear that the advice that was given by the solicitors was inaccurate. Following that inaccurate advice has cost the council a lot of money. We will be entitled to sue the solicitors. Do you intend to sue those solicitors for professional negligence?
Well, I take your point that you're confirming it's the advice we were given, but we've no intention to sue the solicitors at this time.
Why not? I mean, you proclaim fiscal responsibility a lot of the time. This involves hundreds of thousands of pounds of money based on inaccurate advice.
Okay. so because this isn't the only thing the council's doing, there's a lot of, I mean, we are pushing on many fronts at the moment in delivering for the city. It would be a high-risk move, very expensive, consume lots of officer time.
Bit of order, please.
Well, and right now we're in the middle of a bid for £250 million to. Okay.
Right. Can we just have a bit of order, please? Thank you. Finished.
Okay, as I said, if you advocate, to go into legal action would be very expensive, would be time-consuming, and there are, you choose what you do at different times. There are many things we're trying to do, and in terms of the size, for example, one of the things we're doing right now is in the middle of a bid for £250 million to build houses and infrastructure for the city. There's lots of things we're pushing on right now.
We could do no win, no fee.
And we will be, and obviously, we've got the recommendations. We know what needs to come to put the council on a sure footing, and that's what we do. But at the same time, this comes within the context in which, as assessed by outside objective eyes, we've put the leadership of this organisation on a firm footing.
Right. So, another 2 questions coming from Councillor Kent, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to bring us back to actually the beginning of this process, which is in the BDO report, but we don't get to see, of course, what they've actually found from the appointment problems. So my question was around the appointment. Your answer, because not everyone would have seen this, is very short, so I'll just read it to you. The Chief Executive was appointed by the selection panel. Can I just point out that answer is constitutionally incorrect? A Chief Executive or a Head of Paid Service has to be appointed by full council. Correct. We did it. We were here. I remember that meeting. In fact, I can tell you when that meeting was. It was the 21st of February 2017. That's when the Chief Executive was appointed. Selection panel did meet in February. One date was the 13th of February. I think actually had a second meeting in February as well. What confuses me and what leads to my question to you, and I'll reiterate this question, why did you appoint this person, is the press release that went out on the 19th of January 2017. That's a few weeks before the selection committee, where you state that you are proposing Anna Kanowski as the Chief Executive to the full council meeting. The selection panel had not even chosen who the candidate was then. That was the day after the interviews. They met weeks later. How were you able to do that? You were not even on the selection panel. Can you please explain that to full council?
So you're right, it did come to full council. We take that, but there was a majority vote at the selection panel.
So I think we all know the truth in this chamber. And I think everybody out there knows the truth. So come on, why don't you just say, sorry, I messed up. And we can all move on. That's all we really want, is an apology and say, I messed up.
Doesn't have how many different angles you take on the same question. There's a very basic line of activity that happened here. We faced a situation where there were no processes overseeing the departure of senior members of council staff. In that context, we sought advice to guide us through that process, and we followed that advice. And ultimately then, in that context, the decision was made by the self and the senior team. It's that straightforward.
Right, we've gone over our allocated time for questions. So apologies if you didn't get to ask your supplementary. We are now going into speakers on the subject. So, as we know, this is about the report which sets out 3 recommendations, and I understand there may be an amendment to one of the recommendations coming up, which is recommendation 3. So let's get into our speakers, and we start with Councillor Holland, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and I'm going to start where you just finished, which is that this debate is about the report that's in front of us. And I'd like to make it absolutely clear that I'm not somebody who'd had any part in the decision-making process. So like many in this chamber, we've got the report in front of us, and we need to look at that objectively. And reading the report in that light, concentrating on BDO's review, their findings and the recommendations, and not the noise around this issue. The papers we have all make it clear that in this case, the council got it wrong. The processes were not in place, or where they weren't known and followed. The external advice was sought and conflicted with internal advice, and that the HR committee was bypassed. Now we, the council, the mayor, make much, quite rightly, of being a learning organisation, constantly looking at what we've done and how we can do better. And I have to say that that is a responsibility not just on the mayor, the cabinet, the administration, or even just the majority group. It's a responsibility on all of us. And to do that, we do need to be honest about things and transparent in order to build trust to move forward. Now, there are legal and statutory responsibilities on the council as a result of this audit having taken place. It's already been referred to, and that is why it's going to the Secretary of State. And the report, in the second part of the report where it makes clear what the management response is, it does make it clear that the council accepts the findings of the report and that actions have already been put in place to make sure that this could not happen again. And I think that that is the key point, that we don't want to be in that situation again. So the response has to go to the Secretary of State and will be finally reported back to council at a future meeting. And I have to say that as you put forward this amendment, which we understand is coming, we've got the wording of it later, I'd really ask you to ask yourself what the motives of asking for those further reports to Audit and HR are. What difference will it make to the response to the recommendations? Nothing further, in my opinion, will be gained from doing that, because some of the information, as we've already heard, is confidential because of the personal information that that holds. And both HR and Audit, if we are to be a learning organisation, I've had a list of the risk register and so on that the Audit Committee look at. There is plenty there for them to do without going over old ground. The council has, so I reiterate, the council has changed its procedures. We've followed the legal requirements and we want to learn and move on. And so I do ask colleagues around the chamber to vote with their conscience when it comes to the amendment and not just seek to rehash old arguments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And now over to Councillor Eddy, please.
Yes, I, my Lord Mayor, welcome the BDO report. And yes, it does go some way to actually clearing up, which has been not just a political saga, but actually a disgrace to this authority and local government generally. Whilst I welcome it, it's very obvious from what we've heard this evening, it is limited in that only, as colleagues have said, addresses one of the 4 original concerns Councillor O'Rourke, Councillor Hopkins and myself raised. So in my view, it needs to go a lot further, and it just shouldn't be in a confidential verbal item in Audit Committee. So we're asking that actually any consideration is properly looked at by members on HR and Audit meeting together, and that feeds into any actions. That's quite clearly, you should all have a copy of the amendment in my name, which raises that. When I sit down, Councillor Weston will second it, reserving his remarks. But I urge members to actually support that. In my view, we have transparency and we bottom this out once and for all. Only last month, I believe, all of us sat here, and it wasn't very pleasant. Sorry, it wasn't a very encouraging budget meeting, nor frankly have most in recent times we've seen significant frontline services cut and the council tax increase for our fellow Bristolians. It sinks to high heaven that we're actually paying good money instead of on frontline services of senior officers who frankly were not contractually eligible for that, and that needs to be addressed. So I urge you to do so. With this report focuses on one incident or one series of complaints. In my view, frankly, it goes back 3 years to the Nicola Yates fire saga. We then have 2 years ago the appointment of Anna Kuetsky, and of course 18 months ago her departure and the questions which that produced and the loss to the council taxpayer. Frankly, all we've heard today is actually, sorry, it wasn't my fault. Other people advised me. Well, I'm sorry. We've heard elsewhere that, frankly, the buck stops here, and it stops with you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday evening, I should say, I attended a residents' meeting in the heart of the High Ridge Council estate in my ward. I didn't mention today's meeting, but a gentleman there actually said to me, tomorrow at council, tell the mayor we want our money back. Mr. Mayor, we want our money back.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I rise to second the amendment to recommendation 3, reserving my remarks.
Okay, so we go on to our next speaker, which is Councillor O'Rourke, please.
I think I have to begin by talking about transparency, because that's what everybody wants here today, and that's what the BDO report said, that really the reason this is being sent to the Secretary of State is because they're not convinced that there still is transparency. And I think that some of the answers that we've had today has made it even more difficult. I think also, from the point of view of transparency, it's ironic that we have really been painted into a corner here today. I think most people coming to the council meeting today thought we were going to be able to debate and vote on the report. And that's not actually what we're able to do, really. What we're able to do is we're able to debate and vote on the recommendations put forward by the Head of Paid Services. And I had thought long and hard, and before I came in, you know, I looked at the recommendations, statutory recommendations, and I thought to myself, well, yes, they're fine. All a bit brief, a bit slight. Essentially, for sort of phrasing for myself, I've put it down as the recommendations are, don't let the mayor keep things from HR committee, make sure that there's a consideration of value for money if you're making discretionary payments, and keep notes of all your documents. So that seemed like fairly, you know, I could vote for that. But I was given pause for thought when the clarification came out, and I was told that actually it's not a forensic review. It wasn't a question of interviewing all the important main actors in it, but it was a document review. And, you know, the other thing as well is that I've sat on the HR committee for 2 years, 3 years, and I know that we've been told that there was no procedure. That mantra has been repeated again. Well, maybe there is a lack of official procedure, but there was good practice. Since I've been here, there have been many senior executive posts have been referred to the HR committee, and we've made decisions on them. Some we have rejected, and many we have approved. But this one, it's exceptional, it says in the report, that it didn't come there. So, you know, so being told that we don't have a procedure isn't quite correct, and that, again, that's quite frustrating. I think, essentially, there's a sort of truth vacuum at the core of everything that we're discussing today. And that's deeply unsatisfying. People really want to know what actually happened. We want to know who the main players were and what they actually did. I'm not going to reiterate all the things I've said earlier. You know, there's still huge amounts of questions about the whole thing about, you know, going out shopping around for legal advice. I hear what everybody says about they want to know what the legal advice that you got was, Marvin. I'd actually like to know the legal advice that you got that you didn't take, you know, the ones from the other law firm and your own internal advice, because they weren't obviously telling you what you wanted to hear. But again, we're having to deduce, and this is conjecture, and it's not really fair. So I think this is not going to be the end of it. It is going to go to audit. We've only got a fraction of the report. There are many things. I mean, I've got a lot of questions about the probation period, performance management. Why was this person allowed to just roll over into the 6-month notice period without anything happening? And I think finally what I'd like to say is, you know, the mayor in a city has a huge amount of power. It's a very important role, and the people of Bristol absolutely have to have trust and confidence in that person. And I'm not really sure that anything that's happened here today or what's been revealed in this document has given much credence to that. And I say that with regret. It's not something that I'm really gloating about at all, because, you know, we want the people of Bristol to be able to have pride in their democratic system. So, you know, I came in thinking that, yes, I am going to have to vote for these recommendations because they're sensible. I knew that I'd been sort of boxed into a corner, and I think maybe when it goes to push for yes, I probably will vote for the paper in front of us today. But please do not think that I'm voting to say that this report is good enough and that the answers have all been revealed, because that's not the truth.
Councillor Hopkins.
Lord Mayor, one of the things that really annoys me about this is the misleading statements that the Mayor's put in about what happened on the HR committee, trying to look round to blame anybody else but himself for what happened here, because it's down to him. He insisted on this person being put into position before any recommendation from the committee, the selection committee, and basically he is responsible for what happened after that, nobody else. And as Tim said earlier, if basically, you know, everyone makes mistakes, we know that, but it's how you react when you realise you've made those mistakes. Do you actually fess up and say, I got this wrong, and try to put it right? Or, and you should have learned from Richard Nixon on this, that the cover-up is 10 times worse very often than what happened in the first place. We had a number of months of disastrous management, and lots of people around this chamber knew what was actually going on. And at the end of that period, and in fact, as has been alluded to earlier, one thing that HR insisted on before the person was actually selected for the post was that after 6 months, there would be an all-party review, performance review of how things were actually going. Hang on, that didn't happen. Whose fault was that? Not the HR committee, because basically the HR committee had said that that should happen, and the Mayor just didn't do it. And then we were actually told that this lady had to leave to look after elderly relatives. Does anybody in this chamber actually believe that? Do they? Absolutely ridiculous. I've actually had information from a major media organisation in this city, and they've told me very plainly what happened. A lot of the senior officers were giving whistleblowing accounts to the media. They all built up, and when the mayor was approached with these, he knew what had to happen. And shortly after that, Miss Glanowski left this authority in a considerable hurry. We didn't know what was actually going on. And then after we got reports through private eye, I mean, it wasn't disclosed to this council, Rotten Borough's private eye, we found out where a big chunk of money had actually been paid out. Absolutely disgraceful. I'm afraid that nobody in this chamber, if they think about it in reality, actually believes the stories that have actually been told, and basically vote with your conscience. What we need to do now is to make certain that all this is heard and seen in writing in front of HR committee and audit committee, and then they bring a report back to this council along with what we've seen today. And I won't criticise the auditors because I think they've done the best they could under very difficult circumstances. We need to see all of the story together, and then we can form a proper judgment. Hiding it all away will not work, because it'll keep coming back. Believe you me, it'll keep coming back. Thank you.
And over to Councillor Brain, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Ollie Mead for making way so that I could speak today. He was due to speak on but I really wanted to be part of this debate, and I thank him for letting me do so. I'd also like to thank BDO for the alacrity with which they have produced their reports. I did ask Ollie Mead if he would take a bet that Grant Thornton will produce next year's accounts before BDO reported, but he wouldn't take the bet. Mistakes. Oh yes, there have been mistakes made. Loud and clear, I want to say this. Mistakes have been made, and they are big ones. There's no point in trying to pretend that this is not the case. I have been critical of these processes on the audit committee because the audit committee is an apolitical place where councillors should be critical, and if that includes being critical of their own party, then so be it. The legal advice that we received was clearly shocking. I was going to use another word, but, you know, parliamentary language and all. I wouldn't use the legal firm again, and I would consider what Jerome said about suing them. I think we should think about that. I don't see why they should get away scot-free. They've cost us a lot of money. I'm not very happy, like Councillor Negus, I'm not very happy about the fact that we don't have the whole thing here today. Again, that's not our fault. But these things need to be said. I don't believe there's a conspiracy. I think it's been a mess, but I don't believe there's been a conspiracy. Someone will have to prove it to me for me to believe that, and I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think we'll ever get there. The Audit Committee has been independent all of the time that it's existed. I've chaired it most of the years that it's existed, and its independence from party politics has been crucial, and we must keep that. I am concerned that as a result of this affair, we may begin to divide upon party lines in the Audit Committee, and that would be tragic, because only by being politically independent can the Audit Committee serve the people well. We can have our rows and our debates and get after each other in this chamber. That's what we're here for. Where we were elected by people who believe, roughly speaking, the same things that we do, and we disagree. What's best for Bristol, that's okay. But in the Audit Committee, it must be kept independent. In the past, Councillor Gollop, myself, and former Councillor Sean Emmett increased the number of independent members on the Audit Committee to try and ensure that. And councillors in the past have been independent, and I believe councillors today are also. But we must. My biggest fear is that we lose the effectiveness of our audit committee if we divide upon party lines at the audit committee. I certainly will not be doing that, and I call upon councillors and other parties to do the same. There's nothing wrong with deep and probing questions. There's nothing wrong with asking the question twice if you don't get an answer, but please, we must stick together to make sure that the audit committee is independent. And I look forward to examining this report when we get to the audit committee. I may have some questions there.
And over to Councillor Gollop, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Can I just start by thanking Councillor Holland and Councillor Brain for their statesmanlike and diplomatic contributions to this debate. It's restored my confidence in the Labour Party and the values that actually all parties share in the importance of the way this place is run. I have to say, my Lord Mayor, that when we have something of this nature, it pours doubt on the capability and the responsibility of every one of us in this chamber. And I agree particularly with Mark's comments that this is beyond politics. The Mayor won't see the comments I'm about to make as being beyond politics, but I believe they are, because it is responsible for all of us to ensure this place delivers the highest standards it can according to the ability of each and every one of us. And the only problem is, Helen and Mark, the Mayor has put forward today some very poor responses to some very, very concerned questions. You two both stood up and said, we got it wrong. The Mayor has not stood up and said he's got it wrong, and he's not apologised to 3 councillors whom he berated in the most strident personal tones and who have now been vindicated. And that makes it very hard, not for me to associate that with all of you because I respect the members opposite, but it makes it very hard in the context of where the Mayor presents his case. For almost 3 years, Marvin, you've lectured me on caution, on prudence, on financial control. Tonight, my Lord Mayor, that lies in tatters. Every one of those bits of spin that have been put forward. I thought I might answer a couple of questions that came because they haven't been answered. Elka Solutions received a payment of in excess of 200k in the period before and after Ms Klonowski was Chief Executive. I assure officers this is all in the public domain, so I'm not breaching any confidentiality. After she was appointed, Ms Klonowski was paid £116,000 for working for 7 months. She was only on the payroll for 7 months because every payment before that was to a tax-efficient personal service company, members of the Labour Party. You need to know that that was the case. That is appalling. So she was then paid £98,000 for not working. It's a pity, Marvin, that I know I managed to wind you up, but you're not in a position to make such an offer to me. Because that seems to be what happens with people that you fall out with. And when, question after question after question, you said the council did not have processes. As an answer, my Lord Mayor, that is not an acceptable answer. What would have been acceptable was to say, I did my best to follow best practice. Not that there was no process. So whereas I followed that process for half a dozen other departures, I don't need to follow it for this one because I know it'll be controversial. That is not acceptable. And members of the Labour Party, it shouldn't be acceptable to you because we all need to have the highest standards in public life, and the way we conduct our affairs in dealing with senior officers is even more important. And most of all, my Lord Mayor, transparency. The public can't see this as transparent. We can't see it as transparent. In the answer to my question, the Cabinet didn't even see it as transparent because they weren't aware of what went on. That is not acceptable in any democratic system. This is appalling. The BDO report only scratches the surface. We've got a long way to go. This is not enough. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Comley, please.
So, as Councillor Holland said, however we may feel about what has happened, about the lack of contrition or apology, or about the many questions we have that still have not been answered, we're being asked only to vote on the actual recommendations and the proposed response to them. So I will try to set aside my irritation at how much hard work it has taken Paula, Clive and all the other members from all parties on HR and audit committees to drag information out into the light, or how much we and the public who foot the bill are still not being told, and instead focus my attention on the subjects of the vote. The recommendations are, paraphrasing, write down what the process is. Sounds reasonable. Let the HR committee and/or full council approve any severance payments to the head of paid service. Let the people making that decision have the information they need and make sure they actually make the decision rather than just assuming it's approved unless we hear otherwise. Finally, make sure our accounts show clearly what departing senior staff have been paid and for what. I can't quite believe that we had to pay someone else to tell us these things, but there we are. 4 pointers on basic good practice, and the management response is to accept them. I would say this is necessary, but not sufficient. There's a phrase, I think, used in American politics that something is like motherhood and apple pie, which means it's so blandly obvious, so widely accepted as a good thing, that you can't really vote or speak against it, but it basically doesn't tell us anything we didn't already know. I suppose the British equivalent would be a nice cup of tea. So we're basically being asked to vote on a nice cup of tea. We love a cup of tea. These recommendations are fundamentally a nice cup of tea. No one can really disagree with them, but they don't tell us why the basic good sense they contain or the custom and practice procedures followed in other departures were not followed in this case. They don't tell us why the recommendations given in 2017 after the poor handling of the departure of the previous CEO were not followed. And if I'm honest, the way questions on this topic have been treated today does not give me a huge amount of confidence that those lessons about transparency and accountability have been learned yet. So yes, I will be voting for the nice cup of tea, but I don't for a minute think that a nice cup of tea will be enough to solve all the problems of this organisation. And I will be continuing to work and to support work by members from all corners of this chamber to shed light on what happened and ensure that lessons are really learned and practice actually changes.
Councillor Negus, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The past is still very current. Quite a few people, I think, still in this public gallery have had very rough treatment when they've asked questions from the Mayor about this whole situation. And at least 3 councillors, and in fact the Mayor regularly referred to not being able to trust councillors in general because of an event which was proved to have been performed in the public interest by councillors doing their job properly and fearlessly. And that's what we're about, and we should be about in this council. There's been a lot of digging of holes recently, and that's what really sticks in my throat. Not so much errors in the first place, but the way they've been covered up. And in digging those holes, we cleared a load of muck, and we've thrown that muck up as a great big wall between the public and the truth. And that's something that we should be ashamed of in this council, and we should, all of us, each individual one of us, fight all the time to make sure doesn't occur in any circumstance from any of us here. We have a public duty to show this up and be honest and put things in front of some bright light. I doubt very much, Mayor, if the LGA would have been so praiseworthy had they seen this mess unfolding in front of them. And you can keep talking about that because it's a good bit of stuff, but it's not really what we should be talking about, when you should in fact be apologising and explaining what's been going on. And instead you draw on something which is frankly quite meaningless. A leader would resign. I've said that before. A leader would go. You should think about that. I was impressed too with speeches from the other side, particularly Councillor Holland. I very much appreciated what you said, but there were two things which I would ask you to question. The first thing is, we're not being asked to look at the report that's in front of us. We're being asked to look at the report that's not in front of us. And that's why this report that we're going to accept or consider the recommendations of is in itself threadbare, because it can't actually find all the information it needs and follow the trail, but also because it doesn't actually contain the things which are going to be shunted somewhere else. And the second thing you said, Helen, in what was a really very good speech, which I was very concerned about, where you felt you didn't need to accept this amendment. Let me tell you what this amendment's about. It's about sending this document, this information back to the committees, which the report recommends. It said that was a shortfall. That's why some things went wrong. So it's only saying, let's correct what we got wrong. Let's take it through HR. Let's take it through Audit Committee. And let's bring it back to full council after it's been properly scrutinised, which is what they call for in their report. So that's one of the things. The other thing, and the thing I think which might be a problem to some of you, is it says it should be in writing. Now, the reason that it should be in writing is because then we've got a chance of it not being exempt. We can redact, we can put into appendices, we can do all these things, but we can throw the light of day on it, and what's more important, the public can be there to see it and hear it and read it. Instead, it's going to be verbal. It's going to be in a way that, because it's verbal, we can't possibly say that something might sneak out. You know, the old word that's inappropriate might sneak out. We might be talking about contracts. All of that should sneak out, but it should be done we can do it politely and in the correct ways, but we must be doing that. And I honestly ask any of you, can you not see that that's what we're here for? To have it in writing, to take it through the commissions and the committees, to make sure that this is done properly. Why would any of us ever vote against that amendment? Why indeed? And if any of you do, I'm flabbergasted and pretty sick, frankly. You know what this is about. You know that there's a division down this chamber. Please do the right thing. Do the right thing for this city, for this council, and frankly for yourselves as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So we've had the debate, and now we hand over to the Mayor to respond, please.
Thank you. There's lots of material been thrown in the air. I mean, I'll address a few points. I think it's one of the master political plays to do politics and say it's not politics, and even present it as though that's true. And we're seeing a lot in wider society and wider political activity these days, and I think we're seeing some of it in the chamber today. I think, secondly, there's a search. People came in wanting there to be some grand conspiracy, person behind the grassy knoll or whatever. But on failing to find one, you're just simply continuing to say that there is one and just trying to throw things in the air. You mischaracterize the culture we brought to the council when you talk about the absence of transparency. From Bundred to the LGA Peer Challenge, we've offered unprecedented levels of openness and access to the way we work as an organisation. And that just doesn't mean coming in and poring over interviews, hundreds of hours of interviews with councillors and officers, but also talking to our city partners and their perceptions of what we are and their insights into what we are. On the point of criticising councillors that you are obviously quite sensitive about, what I actually talked about was leaking confidential information from the HR committee, which actually has consequences. And
Lord Mayor, can I interrupt at that point?
Lord Mayor.
Because I was one of the people accused
I don't think
there.
we're going to have...
We had an independent
we're not going to have the
inquiry,
interruptions.
and it was proved to be false.
We've
we
had
were
a
acting
debate.
in the public
Point of
interest.
order.
We've had the debate, so now we're going to have the Mayor's response. Thank you.
Thank you. And that stands. I mean, in terms of the arrangements to pay the chief exec that's in question as well, those were set up under the previous administration, frankly, as well. So to talk about the arrangements in some kind of dodgy way when the member was the lead for finance and set that contract up is an interesting position to take. In terms of the LGA, had access to our accounts, looked at our accounts, and were fully aware of our management journey and came to their conclusions on the health and the strength of the management we've put in place in this organisation and the optimism with which we can now face the future with this organisation on the back of hundreds of hours of interviews with people in this organisation, including access to the accounts and our management journey. So the truth is, and I take the point earlier on that they are banal answers, they are, despite, you can ask the same question as many different ways as you want, looking for the answers that you'd like to get, which are in line with this conspiracy. They are banal answers because it is ultimately a banal situation. The process is, we had no appropriate procedures in place for departing senior staff. In line with what was said, and actually you go back to 2012 and there's a very similar situation that happened, in line with an organisation that's governance wasn't in place, the finance wasn't in place, we had a HR system that needed to be looked at. In the face of that, we sought legal advice to make sure that we could navigate through the future that was in front of us. And obviously, we take that legal advice. We work with our senior team. We trust our senior team to come back and having negotiated that. Now, and I stand with them. I'm not saying, I'm not throwing blame onto anyone. I'm saying I worked with that senior team, but it's up to you to chair, Lord. I said that, I stand with that senior team and we made that decision to follow it. What I will recognise and say, there could be questions about the relationship between the senior team and the questions that were asked around that legal advice, but the legal advice was given, and that's what we followed. And in many ways, the truth is that is in where we are right now. Objective, outside eyes.
I can hear what you're saying. I'm sure everyone else can hear your answer. But if you could keep a bit of the noise down a little bit, because the Mayor is asking me to tell you that. Personally, I can hear what's being said. So the outside objective eyes and our in terms of the LGA review, in terms of our reputation with government, in terms of our reputations with investors, developers, people coming to the city of saying this organisation has gone from being a basket case and not getting things done to being a place where people want to come and do business and deal with us. The work we've done around the city plan is an endorsement of the approach we've taken, the kind of leadership that we've introduced to the city. So today, what we have now is a choice. We either support the BDA recommendations and ensure we do get the processes in place, or we reject them and fail in our responsibility to deliver for the council. Right, so we're now going to move to the vote on the amendment. Are all members clear on what the amendment is? Because everything's coming in quite late, and I can't presume that everyone's had a chance to have a look. No, but we have a break coming up as soon as we get through this. So is everybody clear on the amendment to recommendation 3? Is it up on the screen? Okay, good. So we are voting, and it's an electronic vote. We are just voting on that amendment first, okay? Everybody clear? So let's get ready to vote, and please vote now. Okay, so the amendment has been lost by one vote. Very vigilant. Right, this is a technical thing, so I'm going to refer it to the technical team. Okay, you've stated it, so we can take that. So that means we're level. So... Oh, gosh. Okay, this is exciting, isn't it, for my last meeting? Well, I think I'm going to give it to the amendment. So the amendment is carried. Right, so we're going through now with the actual votes on the recommendations. So please compose yourselves and let's get ready to vote.
Lord Mayor, can you just explain what just happened? I've read...
Right, Councillor Negus' vote didn't register. He pressed the electronic button, but it didn't register. Okay, is anyone with better eyesight can hopefully see that up there? Yeah, verified by our technical team. Everyone's like that, so I'm not sure. Yes? But it's up there that it wasn't. Okay, and Councillor Negus, this was noted, and Councillor Negus has made his vote, although it didn't go through on the electronic vote, and he's perfectly allowed to do that. Therefore, it takes the vote level, and I've been informed that as Lord Mayor, I have the casting vote. Does that make sense? Yeah? Good. So, can we now move on to vote for the recommendations, now as amended? Hello? Is everyone ready to vote for the recommendations? Good. Okay, we want to get through this and then we can have a break, so we've still got more business to do. So, we're looking at recommendation 1 now. Can we just ask for a bit of quiet, please? Looking at recommendation 1, which I hope comes up on the screen, just for clarity. No? Great. So, we're voting for recommendation 1, which is now on the screen. So if everybody is ready, and if everybody's blue lights are flashing, no. Don't vote yet, because I haven't called it. Right. So if everybody's ready, everybody's ready, we will now vote for recommendation 1. Please vote now. Okay, that vote is carried. That recommendation is carried. So now let's move on to recommendation number 2. And if you are ready, please will you vote now? Please vote now. Okay, the recommendation is carried. So our final vote on this item for recommendation 3 as amended. Please will you vote now? No, they're not ready? Hang on. Okay. Please vote now. And recommendation 3 as amended is carried. Thank you. That concludes this agenda item, and we will now take a 20-minute well-deserved refreshment break. Hope you're all revived. So firstly, I would like to move that we suspend Standing Order CPR 9.1 to allow the meeting to go past the 2.5 hours limit. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Okay, good. All those not in favour say no. Confused. Okay, show of hands. All those who are happy to suspend Standing Order so we can get through everything else on the agenda, put your hands up. Well, it's looking like people can't be bothered maybe tonight. So who doesn't want to? Well, electric vote.
If it's any help, we could postpone the motions until the next appropriate council, if that would help.
Do you remember that I was going to speak?
My Lord Mayor, can I just ask for a point of... what I think you're proposing was an unended extension of time that could go on in perpetuity. And I'm sure you may well feel like that. But what we might want to know is clarity as to how long you were proposing to extend time. My answer still might be no, but I would like to know.
That's a fair point. Well, you can all see what we have to get through, right? So it depends how much people want to get through the motions, really. I think we can definitely go to past agenda item 9.
So, Lord...
And perhaps 10. I think it's important to get through 10. Licensing. 10 o'clock? Is 10 o'clock reasonable to everyone?
Lord Mayor, may I formally request at your last meeting that if we are not to hear the motions, then the priority for those motions should go through to the next meeting unchanged?
I would imagine that's what would happen, absolutely.
Well, can I establish that, please? Can we agree that as a way forward?
Can we agree that? Does everyone understand the recommendation? Good.
Thank you very much.
So we note that that was agreed, that if we don't get to the motions, they're carried forward as is. Yes. Right, so we've agreed to suspend standing orders. We're agreeing to order, please, otherwise we're not going to get through it. So we've agreed to suspend standing orders up until 10 o'clock. No? We don't need to suspend. Okay. So I need you to vote again whether you're happy to suspend standing orders so that we go over our usual 2.5 hours limit. Yeah. Happy? So we're all pretty much all in agreement now, so let's get on with it. No. Oh, all those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Nay. Oh, the ayes have it. Right. So, agenda item 8, pay policy statement. I'm going to ask Councillor Wellington to move the report, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As Chair of the HR Committee, I move the Council's pay policy for the forthcoming year. It's a requirement that all local authorities publish a pay statement ahead of each financial year. This statement has been discussed and recommended for approval by a majority in the Human Resources Committee. The statement sets out the Council's approach to setting paying conditions for its workforce. The pay policy statement only includes those post holders where the local authority is the employer, apart from the staff of local authority schools who are excluded. The Council is... I was going to sort of lay out a few things in there, but I think I'll curtail it a bit. Only to say that the Council is committed to paying a decent wage to our lowest paid workers. With effect from November last year, the Council became an accredited living wage employer and has increased the lowest hourly rate to £9 per hour as part of the new pay structure. The Council strives to maintain as fair as possible a pay ratio between its highest and lowest paid employees. The current pay ranges for executive directors and directors continues to be competitive and are set to remain at 2018 to 19 levels, as the HR Committee, following the advice of officers, rejected the JNT recommendation of a 2% cost of living pay increase for senior directors. Bristol has the lowest ratio of highest to lowest earners at 9.5 to 1 in comparison with other core city councils, and is below the national average of 15 to 1 in the public sector. In addition, our gender pay gap analysis is less than half the national average, but we will continue to monitor our position through our organisational improvement plan and seek ways to address any disparity in pay. Just to wrap up, I'd like to thank the HR officers for putting this policy together. And while HR have a bit of a thankless task in the council and often face a bit of criticism, they've done a lot of good work over the last year. And I hope the team can continue to turn things round and make this a place where all workers are paid a decent wage and are treated in a way that reflects all of our values.
Thank you. And can I ask Councillor O'Rourke to second the report, please?
Yes, I rise and very happily second this report. I echo an awful lot of what John has said. Lots of really good things are happening, and the HR department are doing a really good job. There's been a lot of really good things. I'm very happy to support the pay policy, but I think I have to have put it on record that I have concerns about how the use of interim officers is subverting the pay policy, and that is something that I have been working hard to address, and I know that I have the support of the HR committee in that, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to ameliorate that situation very soon. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for the other speakers now. So we have Councillor Kent. Councillor Kent, would you like to speak? It's okay.
I apologise. Other councillors were whispering in my ear. I just rise briefly. I will keep this brief because I am aware of the time. I'm afraid we will not be supporting the pay policy before you today. I'll give two very clear reasons why not. Firstly, the ratios given for the lowest to highest clearly are not correct. We all know in this chamber that there is a senior officer being paid by a personal service company. They are excluded from this. The rate they're on is far in excess of anybody else included in this policy. I won't name that officer because that would not be fair to do that. But the situation is unacceptable and that should be included within the pay policy. Personally, I do not think a senior officer should be paid by a personal service company. Secondly, our other issue regarding the pay policy is it does not reflect the debate we just had. We just had a debate about a 98,000 payoff, which does not appear in the figures. We have figures here for 2017, which clearly does not include that of the payoff to our previous chief executive. Otherwise, there is no way that ratio of 8.34 to 1 would be achieved. So the pay policy for us is simply incorrect, and that is why we will not support it. Otherwise, I think we want to get to the vote.
And over to Councillor Eddy, please.
My Lord Mayor, you do not have to be a long-serving councillor like myself to remember when this pay policy was quite uncontroversial. Until 2 years ago, we rarely divided over it, but then Labour's friends in external consultants recommended a 20% tax pay hike for senior officers. That proved too much even for Labour. You did a smoke and mirrors exercise and increased pay by 10%, but then actually on an individual basis, other officers beyond that would have to apply to the Labour-dominated HR committee. My Lord Mayor, it won't surprise you to learn that I'm a simple soul, probably aided by the fact that I went to a Bristol comprehensive. In my day, I seem to recall, mind you, this was pre-Blairite New Labour. Labour claimed to represent the working men and women of this country. Now it seems Labour only truly gets excited when you boost the pay of public sector fat cats. Similar to Councillor Kent, the Tory group also are appalled, actually. of the smoke and mirrors exercise where you're claiming you're hitting the 1 in 10 pay ratio. This is only achieved because you quote the top pay at 165k. Well, I won't be quite as restrained as Councillor Kent, bearing in mind it's been in the press in Bristol, but for a senior officer to be paid 275k per year or £1,400 per working day stinks to high heaven. For those, frankly, it's not just a smoke and mirrors exercise, it's an outright lie. For those reasons, Tory councillors will be voting against the pay policy.
Point of order, my Lord Mayor. Can I raise a point of order under CPR 9.4, and I move that this report be withdrawn and represented at a later council meeting with truthful figures included. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Right, well, I guess I can only put it out to members to agree or not agree to that suggestion. So, are we having an electric vote? Does everyone agree that we're going to vote on this? Well, yeah, so it's been put forward and seconded, so we are going to immediately move to the vote, and that is to basically defer this item. So can you please vote now?
Sorry, I've got no idea what we're voting on. Are we voting on an amendment?
Right.
What is the amendment? Can I get some clarification here?
Councillor Gollop has gone to a standing order point where he can put a motion forward to defer this item. So now, rather than me saying yes or no to that, I'm putting it out to members to agree or not agree to defer this item until there's further information. Is everyone clear on that now? Sorry, it was a bit rushed. Yeah? So the vote should be set up, and can you all please vote now? Okay, that has been lost, so we continue with the item. I'm just going over to the Greens to see if they have a further speaker on this. You don't have to? No? Is there anyone else? Okay. So we could go back to another speaker from Labour or to Councillor Wellington to reply. Yeah?
Yeah, can I propose that we move to the vote and adopt the pay policy statement for 2019-2020?
Okay. So if you're ready, we are now voting on this item, the pay policy statement and the report and the recommendations. So if you are ready and if the vote is lined up, can you please vote now? Okay, the vote is carried. So we move on to agenda item number 9, the making of Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Neighbourhood Development Plan. Please can I ask the Mayor to move the report?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. So I just want to issue some thanks in the first instance for everyone involved in this, for Nicola and Paul as well. But actually, off the back of yesterday, we just want to talk about the wider context for this plan. So yesterday I was in Lotley's to launch the consultation of our local plan, and it sets out the way we are going to deliver, and we are on path to deliver thousands of houses and workspaces over the coming decades, allocating space for development and setting out the standards we expect, which is key to delivering the kind of city on the serious issues that we're actually working on. So as we plan Bristol for the future, we know we need to be deliberate in our thinking about a number of key issues around in terms of the challenges that come with a growing city, student numbers, transport, infrastructure, parks and green spaces, and how we make sure, and agents of change, and also how we make sure the development produces healthy communities and the kind of developments that we realise do not produce problems for us in the future, as we've seen historically. Hengrove and Whitchurch Park sits as part of this, and I'm pleased to be able to support it and present this to full council today. The strong support this received from local people in the referendum shows that local people see the opportunity this place represents, not only to safeguard green space for the existing community, but to go some way to tackling our housing crisis through the delivery of much needed homes, many of which on this site will actually be affordable. So this is why the site forms part of our Housing Infrastructure Fund bid, which, if successful, will bring over £150 million to the city for the development of homes and the infrastructure we need to support the growth in housing numbers. But giving greater control to our communities is a key part of what we want to do. This is a key tool to deliver that. So finally, I know Paul is working on a new plan to protect valued open space and improve its standard link into existing wildlife corridors, and I'm happy to see this coming forward.
And can I ask Councillor Kent to second the report, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to second the recommendation that we make the Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Neighbourhood Plan, and I thank the Mayor for allowing me to do this. Over 3,200 local residents voted in the referendum, one that had a very clear and emphatic result of 85% in support. A turnout more than double than other referendums on neighbourhood plans within the city. Firstly, though, I'd like to thank the residents that worked so hard to ensure the plan was adopted. Ruth Andrews, Steve Bangham, Brian Condon, Andrew Gamlin, Rita Youssef, Jane Hewer, Phil Smith, Phil Tonkin, Ross Whittard, Ray Youssef, Malcolm Hamilton, and Liz Beth, who was their amazing planning consultant. They did the hard work. They actually spent over 2 years working on this plan. They actually brought forward a plan faster than virtually any other community for referendum. I cannot tell you the amount of work they've done. They met nearly every week for 2 years on this plan. They met with council officers, councillors, cabinet members, trying to help shape the council's proposals as well as their own plan. I sort of wish perhaps they'd been listened to a bit more, and then we wouldn't have got into the situation we got into. So the amazing work they did for their community now sees us agreeing a robust policy, which helps us enshrine into planning policy the delivery of additional housing at Hengrove Park. This we are all in support of. Taking on board the clear steer of the Mayor for intensification of sites by setting a minimum density of 70 dwellings per hectare, something I hope the new plan, which there's a specific policy that does that, so I hope you will read it, Paul Smith, because it is stated actually as a policy within the neighbourhood plan, actually sets a minimum dwelling per hectare of 70. Within it is a master plan backed up by policy to deliver a 29.5 hectare park, as previously promised by Bristol City Council. The policy also protects various community and sporting facilities. It is a remarkable achievement what residents have done here. A neighbourhood plan, formed, established, community consulted, plan written, inspection completed and referendum won, all in a period of less than 28 months. Briefly, though, I do want to just raise one issue, and it is a problem with communication with regards to referendums and people actually knowing what they are voting on. With such a large area, it was difficult for residents to access information before the vote. I mean, we tried to ensure every resident did get some information before that vote, but I think residents have reasonably raised with me on quite a few occasions that if government changed, and this is not a criticism of the council, it's covered by government legislation, if government were to change the guidance around this to allow councils to produce a neutral information leaflet, that would have greatly helped the referendum process. I suspect would see a far higher turnout on neighbourhood referendums. As said, this was high, especially for our city, Anyway, I commend the report to you. I hope you know what you'll be voting for, because clearly Paul Smith doesn't, but the rest of us do. Thank you.
And we move on to the other speakers now. So over to Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I stand to support the making of the Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Neighbourhood Development Plan. Firstly, I would like to thank all the people who had helped to put the plan together, and especially to the committee members who, as volunteers, have put a huge amount of their time and efforts into getting this plan created and agreed. They have made sure that the residents have had many opportunities to have an input. I would like to start by saying that I still fundamentally disagree with building any houses on our local park. I, like many others, have had great enjoyment from using this open green space for many years. I do understand that I didn't get the support for this when I previously spoke in this chamber, and we now have to move forward. But I just thought I'd have one final statement of that, just so people didn't forget. I believe that the local people have the best understanding of what's needed and what is good for the surrounding areas. This will now allow the local views to be taken into account when any planning decisions are now made. This plan has been constructed through much local input and has been supported by the ward, and therefore we now need to honour the wishes of our residents and therefore support this. Just finally, part of this plan looked at the issues we still have with transport in the area and what this will bring to it. And it recognises the local roads that will be overstretched. This will affect one in particular, Whitchurch Lane, a road that is already over capacity. Therefore, we ask that you look again at the route for the ring road and actually put it somewhere where it may actually be able to achieve anything. What is being created and not bring the traffic through a residential area and within a few feet of a large school. Otherwise, this development will fail before it's even built. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Morris, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. There will be some repetition here from what you've already heard. So yes, I rise on behalf of my group to offer our fullest support for the Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Development Plan. We too would like to recognise the sheer amounts of hard work by those members that have given up so much of their time to ensure the views of the community are heard. And congratulations to them for winning the referendum so handsomely. Having looked through it, it's an excellent document, and I hope the council will cooperate with the local community and design something that enables us to retain the character of our corner of Bristol. Like Barry, I grew up on the park, played rugby many times in the freezing cold and the rain. Oh, fond memories, but it didn't do me any harm. And of course, this plan is not just about the park, it's about the whole ward, which is great because that's the edge of it abuts the Stockwood ward, so we're very keen to work with people to minimise the impacts that come across the Stockwood ward. What I would like to see in the plan is that we give more consideration for local employment opportunities, because the council has an opportunity to design a great place to work and live without the need for a car, without the need for commuting, and without the need for a ring road going through Whitchurch Lane. So to repeat, well done, and we support. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Stevens, please.
Thank you. To avoid repetition, I'm going to tell you all a story. The British love the underdog, especially when authorities are slapped down. And here we have it in the name of democracy too. So I was lucky enough to be on the planning committee that judged the contest between the council's application plan and then the Hengrove Whitchurch Neighbourhood Development Plan, the battle of the two documents. The Neighbourhood Development Plan had been worked on, as we've heard, consulted, amended, worked on, and so forth for 104 weeks or whatever. And eventually it passed referendum 85% for, with over 3,000 votes. So, but now we come to the committee
when the battle of the documents began. Unfortunately, the neighbourhood plan suffered a knockdown in the first round because the planning department backed the council's plan. So it was always going to be tough for this plan, the development plan, to get through. But it got back on its feet, was dusted down, and seconds out for round 2. And it went on to land blow after blow in front of us judges. Over 100 written objections, 20 extremely well put together statements, and then we came to the climax of the fight. Officers explained that because the top-level plans, the local plan, which we know is still draft, and the West of England Joint Spatial Plan, because they were both in draft, this neighbourhood plan should be given great weight. But was it going to be enough weight to land that knockout punch? So the judges deliberated, conferred, and yes, the Hengrove and Whitchurch neighbourhood plan won 8-3, and we rejected the council's plan. But the houses, what about the houses? But if the council gets its act together, this won't be long, and with some revisions, the rematch when it comes to committee might not be a fight at all. So as long as the council realises it needs to build a sustainable community with the agreement of the residents and the businesses, put in the facilities, green infrastructure, transport links, then us on the committee, we might not witness a fight at all. Maybe a huge big hug. So hoping, Councillor Paul Smith, you can arrange that group hug. And I commend this neighbourhood plan and thank everyone involved in its creation and adoption.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Smith, would you like to respond? Sorry, you, Cabinet Member.
Well, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I've certainly enjoyed this discussion. I'm looking forward to my hug with my good friend, Councillor Stevens. Obviously, I want to echo, firstly, the congratulations, you know, and Tim mentioned this, the amazing result, really, in terms of the actual turnout. Forget the percentage. If you actually look at the turnout for that, it was equivalent to a local council election turnout, which I think is, you know, sort of fairly unheard of. Well, more of maybe in your wards, but and also obviously, as has been said before, the huge work done, the huge amount of work done by the people in the community. So, like Clive, I want to tell a little story and tell you the story of me and Hengrove. I'm going to go back a bit further than planning committee because life did not begin at committee. So Hengrove Park was where I had to do not rugby but cross country over those blooming tumps. It's not vendetta. It's also the first place I saw a circus. This is the last place I've seen a circus, but that's not around. But I also, in 1997, I got this, which is entered into the Register of Gifts, if anybody wants to check, which I won't read the whole thing out, but it's on the occasion of the foundation placing at Hengrove Leisure Park, so that's the cinema, on Wednesday, the 22nd of January, 1997. So my involvement as an equivalent of a cabinet member in Hengrove also goes back quite a long way. After that, in 1998, we secured the money for the substantial children's play area, which still exists on Hengrove Park, opposed by the Liberal Democrats at the time. But since then, they've been won over, and Tim fought a campaign to save the park. Of course, he deleted from his Facebook page my reference to the fact that they'd opposed it in the first place, but, you know, hey-ho. So it does show that things that we bring forward can gain support once they're in situ. And my aim is to deliver the neighbourhood plan, but not the neighbourhood plan of fantasy, the neighbourhood plan that Tim Kent quoted completely incorrectly. Let me read out what it actually says about density. Just as one example, it says, residential development should be of a density of 70 dwellings per hectare. No mention of the word minimum. No mention of the word minimum, Tim, which you said twice. Where this is feasible and viable. So it does not require a minimum of 7. Don't shake your head. I'm reading the document, which unfortunately, I think. Pardon? No, you said a minimum of 70 dwellings per hectare. It doesn't say that at all. Not at all. The word minimum is not there. 70 subject to viability and the practicality of delivering. So my aim is to deliver the neighbourhood plan that was actually passed in the referendum, not the one of fantasy that's in some people's mind, because of course the plan was changed by the inspector. So it doesn't necessarily say everything that the group originally wanted it to say. And the aim of that plan is, yes, to deliver a top-notch park for the people of South Bristol. It is to deliver the 1,400 homes, which is in the plan, which if Barry voted for it in the referendum, in saying none, he voted the wrong way, and to help meet the housing crisis that we have in the city and in South Bristol in particular. And to help with that, I have a trowel. Thank you.
Right, okay, so let's now move to vote on the report recommendations as set out. Another electronic vote. Hopefully all ready. Yeah? Good, so will you please vote now? Okay, the vote is carried. So this will be our last agenda item, and this is just a report of change of licensing committee membership and chair. So as Lord Mayor, I'd like to move this report. And please can I ask Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Leslie Alexander, to second the report, please.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I would like to now move to the vote on the report recommendations as set out. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. Council notes the report. So that will conclude business for today. I think it's in the report. As we know, the motions will be carried forward to the next ordinary meeting. So thank you very much. Can I also say thank you to Dem Services, who've done a fantastic job. Well done. That concludes the meeting.